Planning Committee. Before we begin, I want to address some housekeeping measures. The agenda and reports for this meeting are available on the Council's website. If the meeting becomes inaccessible to the public on YouTube, then I will adjourn to allow for reconnection. If access cannot be restored, then the remaining business with speakers will be considered at a time and date to be arranged. Any business without speakers will continue to be heard. Members are asked to raise their hand to indicate they wish to speak. Once I call you, please turn off your microphone, ensuring that you turn it off again once you have finished speaking. That's important because people press the button, and unfortunately, that's not the way this system works. So if you indicate with your hand up, I'll be able to see you. I've done this for a bit. Yeah, all right. The other thing is, if members are minded not to support the officer's recommendation, then it is imperative that the mover and the seconder give the reasons for that before any vote is taken. So if we can understand that, it will be my intention to just move the agenda slightly, but I'll take the formalities first. I have apologies from Councillor Underhill. Are there any other apologies? No? Going to 7 o'clock, lucky you. Who? Oh yeah, Brad Allen. Apologies from Brad Allen. Okay. Any declarations of interest? I declare an interest on item 10 on the agenda. The applicant's father and I used to have a company together some 15 years ago. Although that really isn't relevant, that is my intention to do so, and it's my prerogative to do so. Councillor Samra.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. On the planning list, item 8, I don't know the applicant, but that property is in the proximity of where I live, so I will not sit on that application.
Thank you. Right, and we'll both leave the room at that point. Right, to have the minutes of the 6th of January, which have been circulated. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved, Councillor Samra, seconded, Councillor Mark Statham. All those in favour of that? It's carried. Thank you very much. Deputations and petitions. I do not know of any deputations or petitions except those that obviously accompany the papers with you today. The local government access to information. There is no item in the private. So there is, I tell a lie. There is an item in the private session, and so therefore we will need to accept the local government access to information to take that in private. Is that agreed? Thank you. Right. Now, can I first of all say to you, apologies. The supplementary paper, which I asked to be as extensive as it is, yes, it's 35 pages, but it is important because there have been some very late objections, not least of all to that of Great Bar Hall. And I think it's imperative that if we were to be challenged, that all of the relevant documentation was available. I'm happy, should you wish to have a slight adjournment if you wish to read those, but I'm sure with the debate that will ensue, you'll be able to look through those 35 pages for the relevant information to any item on the agenda as we get to it. So please don't shoot the officers, shoot me if you want. So, oh, sorry, haven't you got one? Oh, we got some copies here, my apologies. It is available online, but it's far better to read it. You're quite right, Paul. Apologies for that, but you can see here's one we did earlier. I'll wait till the clock has passed those around. As I say, my apologies for being extensive, but I think it's important. The two items which taken up a lot of room on that agenda, as you can see, one is Great Bar Hall and the other one is Slainey Road. So I will ask you to agree to bring forward item 10 to be the first item on the agenda, followed by Slainey Road, because there are members of the public in the gallery who will want to leave rather than stay here all night like we will. Okay, so I'll defer to my colleague, Councillor Perry, to take item 10 on the agenda, having brought it forward, and I'll leave.
Members, item 10 is on page 174 to 208, and I believe we have some speakers. Is that correct?
Hi, sorry, my my mute button and Teams went all funny. Then I do apologise.
Who's that?
Sorry, my whole Teams is frozen. I do apologise. It's the officer, Sally Wagstaff. I do apologise.
Oh, hi, Sally. Sorry,
Hello.
I thought.
Yeah, sorry.
Don't worry.
Moment of panic there. Teams
Don't
just
worry about that.
froze on me.
Okay, thank you, Sally, and good evening, speakers. I'll call the officer to present first. Have you had the procedure explained to you? Yeah. Okay, so the officers will present the report first, then you'll be invited to speak. Objectors first, then the applicants 2 minutes each, and then I'll call you to time at the end of that period. Then there'll be a period of questioning from members if they wish to ask questions of both sides, and for officers, then debate, then decision. It should work like that. May not. Okay, Sally, then over to you. Oh, you can see her. There you are.
Hi, yes, this is the application for 123 Leeswood Avenue. So we can see here it's in a residential area. In terms of constraints here, we can see here on Hobbs Hole Lane, conservation area. No constraints within the site or any of the neighbouring sites. Here we can see a tree preservation order, which is not within the proximity of the site and is not seen as a constraint to the development. Again, from the aerial view, we can see it's a leafy residential area. We can see here that the neighbouring property has had some extensions, which include modifications to the roof. We've got a conservatory here. This is the block plan for the development. We can see that the proposal relates to a first floor extension, loft conversion and roof replacement. You can see here, this is the first floor extension, the loft conversion and roof replacement to the back, and the roof replacement here too. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. My Teams is being a bit funny. It keeps sticking, so the slides aren't moving when I'm talking, so I do apologise. I hope you can see that. I think what I was just saying relating to the proposals, the slide wasn't on the correct one, so I will repeat myself. So we've got the proposed first floor extension, loft conversion and roof replacement. We can see here the changes proposed to the property. Here we can see the existing 3D views of the property. We can see the neighbouring property on this side and the changes that have been made to their roof. We see the garage in close proximity to the neighbour and the application house here. And here we've got the proposed 3D views. So we can see here that where the garage wall is, it's been stepped in from the side. There's a small gap between the neighbour and the application site. We can see the changes to the roof shape from the existing proposal. We've got the existing elevations here. We can see there's a extension already to the rear of the property. And here are the proposed elevations. Again, we can see here, this is the garage wall. It's been stepped in slightly away from the neighbouring property. The changes to the roof shape and the proposed rear dormers within the rear of the roof slope to accommodate the internal loft extension. We can see from the existing floor plans that the existing garage is in very close proximity to the neighbour's house. And here with the proposed floor plan, we can see that the relationship between the neighbouring property and the application site hasn't altered, that there will be a first floor above the existing ground floor garage. The proposed roof plans show the internal works to the roof, and we can see here the two dormers on the rear elevation. This is an existing street scene plan to neighbouring property, the application site here. And this is the proposed street scene elevation, showing the changes to the roof shape, the first floor extension, how that will relate to the neighbouring property. This is a photo of the existing property. We can see the relationship here between the garage and the neighbour. We can see here that the neighbour has had amendments made to the roof of their property. See, it's red brick, traditional style properties. This is the existing rear of the property with the single-storey rear extension. And the neighbour, you can see here there's a dormer roof within the roof slope facing the rear. And we've had modifications including an extension conservatory to the rear of the property. And this is a closer view. This photo shows the relationship between the two properties, and here we can see the garage. So the first floor element would come above the garage here and go across to join the main house. And here is a closer view of the first floor of the property, the neighbouring property and the existing property. And as previously said, the first floor would come up here and join the existing roof. The first floor will be set back from the front elevation of the neighbouring property and the front elevation of the existing house. This is looks to me like it's been a converted garage. It doesn't belong to the application site. It belongs to the properties here. This photo shows a property adjacent to the application site. We can see the design of the roof shape and the render. This is a street scene, photo, sorry, just to show the different styles of roofs within the locality. Again, another street scene photo. This is a close-up photo of the existing house, and we've also got the neighbouring property here. Again, the first floor extension will come up here and join the existing roof slope, not come any further forward than the application house or the neighbouring property. And this is another street scene, a wider street scene, so you can see the application house here, the neighbouring properties on here. Again, further street scene to show the different types of roofs within the locality. And then a wider street scene showing the neighbouring property and the application house. To finish, again, a reminder of the proposal. So the first floor extension, over the garage, is considered that the proposal is in keeping with the design, evolving design and character of the area, and overall it's recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Now turn our attention to our speakers. First of all, I will call Darren Callahan. Correct, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, my name is Darren Callahan. My family and I have lived at 121 Leeswood Avenue for the last 30 years. Both 123 and 121 are traditional detached properties. First, I had some plan concerns. After studying the plans, we found some inaccuracies in the existing 3D street view, which transposed onto the projections. No width measurements was given on the proposed build. This was highlighted to planning, but no amendments were made. We were also told that the planning had width measurements, but refused to give them to us. Let me turn to street view. All other properties in the avenue which have first floor garage extensions have garages adjacent to them. This build does not. The proposed build will be overbearing, overdeveloped, and will look out of place to the street scene. The garage and proposed first floor extension lie flush with the front of our house, causing a terracing effect, which is further emphasised the closeness of the side elevation to 121 being only 200 millimetres. We found this measurement only from the planning report dated the 4th of February. The shape of the roof, now modified with no guttering, is still overbearing. Due to the closeness and the height of the roof, water will flow onto our roof, resulting to further problems to our property. Rear garden light is also comprised. The roof style is not in keeping with the street scene. The roof style cannot be compared to number 141 as report, as it is a standalone, totally unique property with no house in close proximity. Although maintenance is not considered by the council, this build will mean that we can never maintain the side of a detached property again. It is half rendered. 123 plans also show their side wall will be rendered and painted. This is impossible to do, another misleading point from the plans. I do hope you can understand our dismay and frustration as to why anyone would want to build so close to another property. To pass plan permission to the detriment to the neighbouring property and street scene seems a wrong decision. I would have presumed both parties would want to remain distinctive and detached. As I hope I can imagine, it's not a nice feeling that after 30 years of living there, I will potentially never see the side of my house ever again. Design and planning should not be all about maximising space. It should be about first and foremost about street scene and neighbour amenity. I hope you can picture our description. I would ask you to defer the decision and that a site visit could take place to understand the real impact of the avenue. We are reasonable people and trust a solution can be found. Aldridge is a traditional village with traditional properties. We all have responsibilities to keep it this way. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Deborah Day.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, it is firstly important to understand that the plans submitted by the applicant did not provide a true representation of the proposal would have not only on my client's property but also the avenue itself. My decision of the impact of the proposal has been informed by a site visit as well as consulting information provided by my clients. I would urge the committee to defer making their decision if they have not also had the opportunity to make a site visit and are minded to support the officer's decision. The officer correctly notes that the street scene is a mix of styles and types of houses. She also correctly notes that a number of nearby properties have extended to the side with varying styles and gaps to the boundary. However, there is clearly no gap proposed to the side of this extension, and at the site visit, I noted that there is not one other property that is similar to this proposal. It is overbearing, in keeping with the streetscape, and whilst as planners we cannot take the boundary disputes into account, it is obvious that the proposal will give rise to boundary issues. I would ask that the committee take this into account and the fact that the proposal cannot be implemented. My clients are not against the proposal to extend the property. They are just requesting an amendment to the design that allows enough distance to not create a terrace look and allow for maintenance. I would also like to point out that my clients were refused planning consent for a side extension scheme due to terracing and impact on street scene. Whether the proposal is considered appropriate within the street scene is a subjective matter, which often gives rise to differing views, as with this case. However, my interpretation, which is also backed by others who live on the avenue, is that it's out of character, over-dominant, harmful to the visual amenities of the area, and therefore does not accord with the requirements of local policy. Therefore, hope that the Planning Committee put aside the Planning Officer's legislative interpretation of the proposal and listen to local residents and form their own opinion on the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Malkin.
Thank you very much, and good evening, members of the Planning Committee. Thanks for the opportunity to speak in support of our client's application. As is clearly set out in your Planning Officer's report, the proposed extension and alterations to Mr. Moran's property are acceptable in planning terms. The design of the extension sits acceptably alongside the character of the existing dwelling and will sit acceptably in the mixed context of the area. Throughout the process, the applicant has worked with your officers, has amended the scheme to meet the council's requirements. This ensures that the extension appears subservient to the existing dwelling. The amendments to the application have allowed for a set-in from the boundary at first floor level, which protects the amenities of the neighbouring residents and removes any issues with regards to the terracing effect in the locality. In addition, a separation distance to properties at the rear of some 33.5 metres is provided, which alleviates any concerns with overlooking, and the 45-degree code is not breached by any property extension. The scheme does not therefore result in any loss of light or any overbearing impacts on neighbouring properties. The property can provide for a total of 3 off-street parking spaces, which is sufficient to serve a 5-bedroom property. As set in your Planning Officer's report, the majority of the comments from neighbours raise non-material planning considerations. These therefore cannot be considered as part of the determination of this proposal. We therefore hope that members follow the Officer's recommendations and grant planning permission for the proposed extensions and alterations to the property. Just to follow on comments of the objectors, the plans are correct, they are drawn to scale, and they are readily available to be measured. We feel it's unnecessary for you to defer this application. Officers have rigorously considered the scheme, they've sought amendments and are happy with the proposal. And also with regards to the neighbours' previous refusal, obviously members will be aware that 2 schemes can't be considered with each together, and each application should be considered on its own merits.
Thank you. Mr. Moran.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Don't really have much to add other than to thank the planning department for their help and communication during this process, although it has been slightly lengthier than envisaged. And I welcome any questions to follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just before I call members to or invite you to ask questions for our speakers, just to remind members, you helpfully actually did then. Each application is considered on its own merits, so to consider that when you make your decision, but also just for the speaker's benefit, site meetings are not held, which is why the photographs are shown and the presentation is as it is. So any questions for our speakers from members? Councillor Staven.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for the objectors. The lady applying was Deborah. You mentioned about planning permission being refused. Can you elucidate on that? Because in our planning history, it says planning permission for a side extension, garage and dormitory was granted.
Yeah, there was one. It was in relation actually to my client's property, and it was refused on grounds of and not being in character with the area. So the point we were trying to make was that that one was classed as being terraced. This one isn't.
Yeah, the point I'm making is it says in here that it was actually granted. It was granted in 2003.
Do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, that's just for property
Yeah,
121, which you were referring to.
That's right.
Your client.
Yeah, it's my property. Yes, it was refused in 2003 on the grounds of terracing. We amended the plans actually, and then it was passed. But we had to step it down, and we had to sort of.
So it was subsequently granted. That's all I was seeking clarification.
Could I just make a point? There was no objections whatsoever to the initial plans. That was rejected, and as I said, it was rejected for terracing.
Can I just stop that, please? We are not talking about that application. We are here to decide the one that's in front of us. That's previously gone through a process, and this is to be treated on its own merits. So I can move it on, please. Any more questions, Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Chair. To the gentleman, the objector, you said that the garage, the proposed garage, was in line with the front of your house. I think that's what you said, and thus would cause a terracing effect. But I read in the documentation that there is no terracing effect because it's set back. So it's important that we know, that's black and white. Is it level or is it set back?
But the 123 house is slightly forward to our house, but the garage where the extension is going on top is flush with our property. So it is a terraced effect.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. Any other questions for our speakers? Councillor Craddock?
Yes, to the agent on the end. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. In the plans, the objectors have actually referred to the fact that the wall, which will be adjacent to their property, is scheduled to be rendered and painted. I'm curious, who proposed to do that?
I think I might defer to my client to answer that question.
To be honest, that's gone past us. We hadn't noticed at all. We pass, quite simply. We will build it to the drawings, obviously. I'm not sure how we propose to do that at all. May I offer another point in answer to that? No, it's fine.
No, you can.
We will be using materials as written in the report that are sympathetic, if not the same as the building is already constructed in, other than rendering it.
Councillor Craddock.
So the other point was they talked about the drainage off the roof, which is adjacent to their property. Is that water going to be ducted away through proper gullies and ducts and rainwater?
Again, as the drawings have been amended so many times, I believe that gutter has been missed off the latest revision of the drawing. If we revert to the earlier drawings, it does show a gutter in place.
Can I ask the question then? Because that if the drawings that we're making a decision on aren't correct, should we be making a decision?
Okay, well, that's something we can ask officers when we get to that point in the agenda. What I do want to say is if you read the recommendations, which is what I was going to ask officers anyway, but I may as well do it at this stage because it may help the debate. It does state that it's delegated to officers to finalise conditions, and some of these things could be finalised in that realm. Okay, Councillor Samra.
Thank you, Chair. Could I please ask Sally to put the design back up, please? I think that would benefit members.
Yes, of course, Councillor, bear with me.
Showing both properties, please.
Yeah.
Could you zoom into that, please, by any
Yes,
chance?
of course. Is that sufficient? Can you see that okay?
We can. I was actually see the gap between 1, 2, 3,
gap.
1.
Is that
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
oh,
So
bear with me.
the objectors here. You're objecting to this application on the, you believe if this application was granted, it would cause a terracing effect. Potential terracing effect. Yes, that's what you're, okay. You yourself obviously have built an extension on your house. So had you not built that, and they'd obviously built theirs, or the other neighbour because of the way the properties sit, you would still get that if they'd got there before you. Would you agree? The answer is yes or no, sir. Thank you. Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, I'll move this to the next stage then. Any questions to our officers? Councillor Craddock?
Well, very much the same question I've asked the objector. So if the plans aren't here, is that then, or does that then become part of the delegated negotiations that you have with the client?
Yeah,
Mike,
happy to, Sally, do you want me to come in on that?
please, if you can.
Thanks. Mike Brett, Group Manager for Planning, just for the benefit of people in the meeting. So we do have a recommendation for delegation to deal with planning conditions. So certainly anything that can be dealt with by condition can be delegated. If we're looking at amended plans, if they are minor in nature. So if we're talking about guttering that wouldn't make a material change to our considerations, then again, we can do that by way of updated plans in the amended conditions. Yeah, sorry, one very final thing to add. In terms of just making sure all plans are up to date, that's part of the process that we would do as part of finalising those conditions. And the point on the render, again, could be dealt with in that manner.
Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Chair. Same question that I asked to the objector, really. I mean, the objector reckons that this will be built level with the front of his property and will cause a terracing effect. Officer's report tells us that it's set back and there is no terracing effect. It's got to be one or the other. Can we find out which one it is, please?
Yes, I'll show you the plans again. Let me zoom out a little bit. We can see here, this is the line of the existing garage. And this is the line here of the first floor. This is the front elevation of the existing house and the front elevation of the neighbouring property. And we can see here the bay window.
So Nawaz, can you return to your seat, please? Thank you. Can you continue?
Sorry. Yeah, so here is the bay window of the neighbouring property's house. It comes no further forward than the main property and the neighbour's property. So you can see here, existing garage. It's in line with the existing garage at first floor. This is the front elevation of the neighbouring property and the bay window. And the front elevation of the main property comes no further forward than the existing property and is set back from the first floor of the main house.
Okay, any further questions for officers? Councillor Craddock?
Yeah, I'm curious about a line on the report on page 177. In terms of representations, it says there have been several representations from neighbours, which I understand, and interested parties further afield. I don't understand that. What does that mean?
So we have had representations from local residents, including those on Leeswood Avenue and those further afield within the Walsall Borough and within Aldridge. So we've had, essentially what we've had is representations for those also that do not live within the immediate locality of the property.
So Sally, could you confirm the numbers from Leeswood Avenue, please?
Yes, bear with me.
Further afield.
Yeah, can I just
Yeah.
stop sharing my screen a second so that I can find those? Bear with me a second. So we've got 121 Leeswood Avenue, 134 Leeswood Avenue, 138 Leeswood Avenue, 3 The Glades, 67 Well Lane, 4 Oaks, 19 Westbourne Road and 22 Brookfield Road.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Any questions for Councillor Nawaz?
Can you just confirm we've got someone from 4 Oaks objecting to a application in Aldridge?
Correct. That's the address that we have.
And what's the resident's application? What's the resident's objection in 4 Oaks? Is it going to be affected by the noise?
Sorry, say that again, Councillor. I didn't quite hear the end of that.
I just want to know what the objection is from somebody who lives so far away.
I can find that out. I can find that out for you, Councillor. Bear with me. I don't have. Yeah, I don't.
As there is a summary of all the objections in the report, so it'll be amongst those.
I should know that.
The what I would suggest is when we're in debate, it's up to members what weight they add to that of objections. Any other further questions to our officers? Okay, no, thank you. We now move to debate. Councillor Samra.
Chair, I move the recommendation. I mean, the officer's report is quite clear. They're happy that there's no terracing effect there. So I duly move the recommendation to approve.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Bott. Any other comments? Councillor Nawaz?
Yeah, I mean, just back on that point, if this was a historic building and we had objections from across the borough, perhaps even further afield, that would be understandable. I mean, when we have people objecting who live so many miles away to a domestic property extension, I get a bit annoyed because you know, the objectors, I understand if you live on the street, I understand why you would be concerned, but when it's so far away, it makes a mockery of the fact that your life's going to be affected negatively if you live 10 miles away. I just wanted to make that point because it's quite bizarre to see somebody objecting.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Hussain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, listen to the discussion from both sides and look at the office report. I think that is quite bizarre. Somebody who doesn't live in that vicinity and close to a property has got an objection to this application. I think the officers have done due diligence and it meets the criteria and the planning framework. And I think, agreeing with the speakers, I think we should support this application.
Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Chair. I've got great sort of sympathy with the objector here, insofar as having been there for 30 years and then all of a sudden finding out that you can no longer gain access to one entire side of your property. That's never happened to me, but I would imagine it's a pretty disconcerting thing to have to face. However, I'm struggling to support the objection because we're told quite clearly that that is not a relevant planning consideration. Maybe it should, but I mean, we do see this happening all over the borough and probably all over the country, where all of a sudden, you know, after you've been in a house 30 years, somebody builds up against it, literally 1 inch away, and you've lost all access and you can never paint it again or do whatever you want to do. So I do have great sympathy, but I can't see any grounds to support the objector because, you know, relevant planning, material planning conditions don't support him, very sadly.
Thank you. I can't see any other speakers indicated, so I will take the vote as put. So the recommendation was moved by Councillor Samra, seconded by Councillor Bott. All those in favour? Any against? One against. Can our legal officer read out the recommendation then, please?
Mr. Chairman, the committee has resolved to delegate to the head of Planning and Building Control to grant planning permission subject to the amendment and finalising of conditions. That's in accordance with the officer's report and the supplementary paper, and will enable the officers to ensure that up-to-date plans are conditioned and that the guttering is added to the side of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, speakers, for attending. And before I call back in the chair, can I just ask members, it is important that you're not seen to be conferring with each other during debate. Thank you. Councillor Bird, you're willing to, if you're out there, I think. Thank you.
Right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Next item will be that of Slainey Avenue. There's people in the gallery, I think, who want to listen to that. So following that, then we will allow them to leave. Well, Yeah, you did very well. I was watching it. It wasn't very good. Miles away. Right. Councillor Gulter-Sib, she's asked me to bring this forward because she has another appointment. And as I said, there are a lot of interested parties in the gallery who could then, should they so wish, leave, or they can sit and enjoy the entertainment. We have to be here, I'm afraid. Okay, then. Slainey Avenue. Michael?
Thank you, Chair. Mike Browson, Group Manager for Walsall Council. I'll just bring the presentation up for you. Sorry, I'll try that again. Evening. Mike Browson, Group Manager for Planning at Walsall Council. Okay, so this application relates to 42 Slainey Road. The reason for bringing to committee is significant community interest. So the site is on the screen. You can see that the building currently occupies the majority of the site outlined in red, and there are a number of protected trees within the site boundary and the periphery. Residential location as well, and just some context for the tree line at the back there and the residential nature of that location. In terms of what the proposal is for, it's a change of use from a nursing home to a 37-unit sui generis use for the vulnerable homeless people with associated amenity, recreation, training and signposting. So there have been a large number of objections and petitions received in relation to this proposal, and those are set out in the report and the supplementary paper. There has been a previous refusal of a similar proposal, which was withdrew, and we now have this current scheme before us. So you can see the existing building and layout in its use or former use as a care home, and the proposed plans that show how the internal layout would be used to accommodate the 37 units for the sui generis use. So some photos of the existing site and the exterior to show you how it currently looks. Further photos of the site. And again, in its context with on-street parking and some of the existing residential properties. And further views up the same street. Residential flats and other properties and on-street parking in the vicinity. The open space at the end of the road. And you can see the tree line that we mentioned earlier. And again, just some more local views of some of the on-street parking in that locality. So it was previously a nursing home, currently up for sale. Some works had started on site that required planning permissions, so they were advised by the local planning authority to stop whilst the current application was being determined. It's predominantly a terrace street with the on-street parking, as you've seen on the photographs, which is well used throughout the day and evening. You've seen the park at the end of the road. The proposals do, in our opinion, bring an intensification to the area in terms of the use that's proposed and the size of the proposal having an impact on potential impact on the character of the area. So the applicant has confirmed there would be 24/7 hour staff on site and there would be a code of conduct to try and minimise any impacts that might arise. However, no management plan has been provided as part of this current application, which would demonstrate how the site would be effectively managed. So in terms of the key consultee comments, we've had objections from our housing standards team on the internal space not meeting the necessary amenity standards, concerns from our local highways authority on parking, impacts on amenity, intensification of HMOs in the locality from other consultees, and from the police in terms, again, of the intensification and on antisocial behaviour. In So the supplementary paper, there's a few items to cover in that. I'll talk through the refusal reasons first, which have been updated. So we have 4 reasons. The first one being an addition to an existing concentrations of this type of use in the locality. Based on the details that we have in front of us, we're not convinced that that would be effectively managed and could lead to increased fear of crime and anti-social behaviour. The second refusal point relates to insufficient on-site parking to cater for the proposed development. The third refusal reason, again, is about an increase in parking demand and lack of a proposed layout that demonstrates an existing relationship between the existing structures. And again, to do with the impacts to existing residents along Slainey Road. And then the fourth reason relating to a failure to demonstrate how parking for potentially disabled residents and occupiers would be accommodated, and any lack of secure cycle storage for the site. So there has been objections, as we've said. Some of those are set out in the supplementary paper. We've had 3 letters of objection received after the committee report was prepared. We've had a further 3 letters from Valerie Vaz MP, and the points are covered out in that supplementary paper. What they do is reinforce some of the issues and concerns that the local planning authority has, so we don't consider there's any change to the recommendation. The petition's included within the supplementary paper, so you can see the details of that should you wish. I'm just making sure there's nothing I've missed. And that's it for the supplementary paper. So the recommendation is to refuse for the 4 updated reasons as read out. Thank you, Chair.
Are you speaking on this item or the lady first? Leah, I believe, according to my notes. Got 2 minutes, Leah, and then I'll have to stop you speaking, I'm afraid.
Go.
When you're ready, yep.
Thank you. So we've joined as a group of residents here just to really express our absolute frustration and disappointment that this has even come up again, and to confirm that we support the suggestion that this is refused. We already have existing HMOs on the street, and the residents in those HMOs are of the same profile suggested for this particular site. We've had some good residents, but some terrible ones who've quite literally terrorised the street with racial abuse. A lot of the police complaints are down to particular residents of exactly this profile. We've had lots of antisocial behaviour. We've got lots of elderly neighbours and families on the street, and they're very, very nervous and very, very scared. We receive verbal abuse from these types of residents, and it's very unsafe. I mean, my daughter showed you her objection slightly earlier, and I've got 2 children who I'm not very happy about going out and playing on the street when we've got these kind of residents being suggested. So we're doing our fair share for HMOs. We do not need another 42 bedrooms. We've got really diverse and respectful neighbours. So we've got lots of groups of different racial groups. We've got lots of ethnicities, lots of different religions, and we look after each other. The reason that we're all here in force is because we talk very regularly. We make sure that the residents are doing well. We've got different family groups, and the transient nature of a HMO does not contribute to a sense of community at all. So another reason we're not happy. I don't know if any of you, apart from the residents, have ever been to Slainey Road. It's near on impossible to park, and that's if you're a visitor. Imagine what it's like for the emergency services. We have got lots of elderly neighbours. We've got lots of children. The only time we could get emergency services onto the road easily was during COVID, because it was dead and it was very quiet. But I don't want us to have to rely on that. So there's no additional provision for parking. And that's my point, really. I hope I've got everybody's points across. That's my 2 minutes. I'll go from there.
So 20 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gortasim.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this item forward. I'm here today not only to represent the residents of Pleck, but also as a resident of Pleck myself. And we all, as residents of Pleck, live in the HMO capital of Warsaw. We all, as residents of Plek, suffer with having to live with high levels of deprivation, high levels of antisocial behaviour and crime, and the associated costs, for example, car insurance, home insurance. And we're hard workers. We do our bit for our community. We love our community. We love our neighbours. And it's like we're being penalised continuously by having things imposed upon us that are going to affect not just the standard of our lives, but the standard of the lives of our children and the elderly. So I'm hoping that everybody here tonight will follow the officer's recommendations and refuse this planning because we've had enough. As residents of Plek, we've had enough of being subjected to things that are just going to impact quality of life, because we deserve a life that's full of quality, just like everybody else in the borough. So thank you for listening to me today, and I hope you follow the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. For the record, obviously, we'll decide this on planning grounds, and as a result, what we've heard tonight, you take into account on planning grounds and its merits only. So thank you for that. Correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes not very often. Am I correct in saying this was used at one time as a cannabis factory?
Yes, it was one of the largest cannabis factories within the West Midlands.
It was one of the largest grow houses that was ever found by the police in the West Midlands.
Actually, the only reason I found out was because it was drawing so much electricity that the entire electricity on the street went out. We had neighbours with no lights, no fridge, so all their food went off, and it was very, very scary.
And forgive me, but was that the current owner or previous owner?
Current.
Thank you. Okay. Not relevant to planning, but a bit of history helps, doesn't it? Okay. Any Councillor Kizza saying?
Yeah, my name's Councillor Kizza saying from Pleckwood. My questions to you, as you live there, Leah.
You get your mic on, Kizza?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I can't see. Nazir's head's big.
Yeah. I'll speak. Yeah, I'm pretty loud anyway, but I'll try to speak louder. Well, equally, Leah and Nahid, you both live in that area, especially yourself, and you experience obviously with issues from other HMOs, and you've said that in your statement that there's been a lot of issue with crime, antisocial behavior, and parking issues. Yeah. Do you feel strongly that if this planning application is granted, that's going to have a detrimental impact on your life further and the life of other people in the area? That's my first question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we do have 2 registered HMOs, 2 unregistered HMOs. There are probably 16 residents between all of those already. It is very scary when you've got people who are addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol. They've not lived in a house for a long time, so they're not used to a polite way of engaging with the community. It's okay-ish for me because I'm quite young. We've got lots of elderly residents who are very nervous. They feel that they can't come out. These people invite drug dealers to the road. It's scary. So having 42 at the bottom of the road at the entrance to the park that we all use would be terrifying.
Just to add upon that, residents, we support everybody in our community, and the people that take up places in HMOs, they're some of the people that are most in need. However, this is the second time this has come to committee, but no adequate changes have really been made that would mean that the committee officers felt that it would warrant being approved. So that just shows, in my opinion, and in the residents' opinions, that really, does he actually care about the people that are going to be in his HMOs? No, because if he had, this would have passed the planning, the approval bit. They would have wanted us to approve it, well, you guys to approve it. But if he actually really cared about those people and he wanted to make a difference to their lives, he would have put every step that he could in place to make sure that the HMO got approved. That's all I want to say on that.
One further question, Mike, if you allow me. Yeah.
Well, this is the question, not a speech. Thank you.
No, absolutely, yeah. My further question, what sort of crimes in the past, because of these HMOs, have been happening there? You mentioned the parking as well. would you say this has been continued and made it worse with the HMOs already there?
Okay, so I'll start with the crime first. Some of the residents of the HMOs have verbally abused residents on the street. Because of current conditions, the police are under significant amount of pressure and they can't come out every time we call them about antisocial behaviour. So it's basically left for the residents to fend for themselves. We've had racial abuse. They're very loud, very noisy, lots of music, noise disturbance, and it's quite frightening. The second point is parking. The applicant said that these are homeless people who will not have cars. Lots of people are homeless and do have cars. In addition, there's deliveries, there's food services coming here, there's the access for the emergency vehicles. There is nowhere to park on this road. It's incredibly dangerous to cross the road. It's a dead end. So people drive very quickly down the road, and because there is nowhere to park, people trying to cross the road are in great danger. So this is only going to exacerbate the issue.
Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. How many, you say you've got 2 registered and 2 unregistered HMOs. How many does that represent as far as numbers is concerned?
I believe there are 4 flats in each of those HMOs, so 16 total. 16 individual residents within the 4 properties. That's not to mention that on the corner of Slainey Road, there's a shared housing as well. And then there's supported housing on the opposite side on road. And those are not even on Slainey Road, but they're at the top of our street.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Waz.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me how often the police attends Slainey Road? Because you've spoken about lots of problems. And the report makes quite a lot of things from the police, which I'll come to when we debate. But can you tell me how often the police comes there?
It's quite hard for me to say. All I can say, and hopefully my neighbours don't disagree, is that 98% of the call-outs for police are in relation to the HMOs. There is no other activity. In the police report, he suggested that actually a significant percentage of the calls outs were just for 2 particular residents over a period of time. And these are residents with exactly the same profile that the applicant is suggesting go into his property should he get planning permission.
A final question, if I could, Chair. Just about the traffic and access, because you've spoken about the parking. So one of my concerns is the emergency services. So can you just tell me a bit about how they struggle to come in and turn around? Because it's a dead end. I'm guessing they have difficulty in turning around.
Well, they have to block the road. There is very rarely any space to park a car in the evenings or at the weekends when everybody is home. In the daytime, if you're lucky enough that your emergency happens between 12 and 3 o'clock, you might get an ambulance be able to park near to the house, not in front of it. It would have to be near, but it would only be in that window. There is no space for parking. My house is one of the very few with off-road parking, and it has been blocked on occasion by an ambulance because there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, can I just add, as a councillor, I would say nearly all of the casework that I've had from Slainey Road and around the surrounding area has either been because of the parking or because of the antisocial behaviour that residents are experiencing from HMO residents.
Anybody else? No? Moving to the officers then. Any questions to the officers, please? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Legally, we're obliged to consult with various partners and outside bodies. Top one listed on page 187 was housing standards. And housing standards have basically said that this place doesn't come anywhere near the standards required for an HMO. But we don't list that as a reason not to give, we don't list that as a reason to refuse planning. So is it a relevant planning condition, or do we just consult with them for the sake of it and it doesn't make any difference?
Thank you, Councillor. So the points raised are valid ones. They're not necessarily material. So in planning terms, what we have to look at is the overall proposal and whether overall it would meet the councils and the national policies and guidance in general. So there aren't any specific policies in planning terms that dictate what a HMO should or shouldn't provide. So it's not necessarily a material planning reason that we could refuse on. What we do try and do is work with applicants to try and negotiate improvements. So if we're looking like it might be supported, then we'll always try and negotiate to improve where we can internal arrangements. But as I say, that's only through negotiation rather than being a policy basis.
It's fair to say, Councillor Murray, that if we were minded to approve this, they still would require a licence from our housing standards officers, which is where that particular part of the report would come into play. And obviously, the fear of crime is something no doubt we'll discuss. No, I got it written into the law, as you know. So I think that might just feature somewhere later in the debate. Councillor Samra, and I think Councillor Wahid Saab after.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, page 191 of the report does say the West Midlands Police have provided statistical evidence to suggest as a result of the development, the fear of crime or antisocial behaviour by the occupiers of nearby dwellings is likely. Why is that not part of this report? Those stats would have been very important.
Thank you, Councillor. What I haven't done is read their response in detail, so I'm presenting the item tonight based on the report we have before us, but appreciate the point, and certainly we have in the past and can make sure we do in future to include that sort of detail. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Basically, Councillor Summer makes the point, rightly so, that the fear of crime, of course, is a material planning consideration. As you know, that's my claim to fame some years ago. Having said that, it is always the case that the officers will say that we have evidence of that. Well, there is evidence of that, which my colleague Councillor Perry has just shared with me, that this particular part is one of the biggest areas, hotspots, if you like, for illegal tobacco and other illicit activity, which is on the police data, not mine. Councillor Wahid Rassab, I'll come back to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if you remember, this application came to us previously and refused. I just don't understand why we're debating this application. What has there been significant changes since the last application? As far as the HMO is concerned, in Birmingham, HMO supported accommodation is under severe investigation because it's not being properly managed. And if you look at their application, it doesn't tell you how they're going to manage this, where they're going to get the referrals from, how the referrals are going to be managed, what the staff's going to be. So if the HMO is a big issue in Birmingham, in the West Midlands, I don't even know why we're debating this. There's been no considerable change in the application.
Can I just say that the items you refer to would be a matter for the Housing Standards Department. Having said that, the reason we're debating it is because by law, they're entitled to make as many applications as they wish until we decide it's a vexatious application, at which point in time we can refuse to determine. We haven't got to that point yet. I do take on board and your frustration and indeed the amount of officer time this has taken. But the reason it's taken so long is alluded to in the report, but I don't wish to go into that publicly. If you look further into the report, you'll see why.
I haven't finished, Chair, because they're saying that there's no demand for HMOs in Walsall. We've got one, I'm aware, and the Chair yourself, you're aware of this. There's an HMO, it's been empty for 12 months.
That's a commercial decision, not a planning decision.
So
I hear what you say.
We don't need HMOs in Walsall.
Well, there is a community impact policy which we've introduced at my request, so that we can look at curtailing excess HMOs. And as you will be aware, I think it's 5 residents or more requires a licence, and therefore we are very successful in prosecuting those people who do not comply to the standards to which you refer. But tonight, this is a planning issue. I do share your frustration, but the officers can only determine what they get an application for. Councillor Mark Staden is next.
Thank you, Chair. I just seek some elaboration on concern on conclusions and reasons for decision on page 193, paragraph 2. Oh, brace it. The applicant has failed to address issues raised and the local planning authority questions the validity of the information presented.
Can I just say that's part of the thing that we don't want to discuss in public. That is a police matter. You just accept my word on that. My understanding is that some of the supporting documentation was questionable. Very unusual. That's why it's taken so long to get to committee. Any other
Yeah, I think Mikey overruled me. My question was regards to representation on page 188, and it was letters of support appears to be forged. You just overruled me. So
the least said about that, the better. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think members will understand what that means. I won't make any further comments on that. My question to the officer is, obviously this planning application has been going round and round for 3 years. The residents have suffered anxiety, stress in this application. This application was given 12 to 18 months ago when it first. How come it's taken this long to make a decision?
Can I refer back to the comments I've made? That there has been some police investigation, and therefore we were not in a position to bring it to this committee, as it could have been judicial to the investigation they were conducting. Only a few weeks ago, we were advised that that investigation was either completed or whatever, and I instructed officers to get this to a committee as quickly as possible to determine it. So I don't want to say more than that in public, because I think it is important that we respect the requests we were made by the local police.
I totally understand. I appreciate that. Just for the reference, councillors weren't informed of what was happening. So for future reference, officers can inform councillors.
Just say councillors weren't informed because it could have inhibited the police investigation. If it makes you feel any better, I wasn't informed either. So it is important whenever things of this nature are conducted by the constabulary, we are sworn to secrecy, otherwise we could be in contempt of court. Right, having got rid of that then. Any other questions to officers? No. Any questions in debate? The councillor saying.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do want to say something, because this is the opportunity I'm going to have. This application has been going on for a long, long time. The residents, as you hear, quite a number here, and they have suffered a lot of distress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure of fear of this planning application, how it's going to affect their quality of life. This application is a very bad application. The locality of this application is not suitable. There is already several HMOs in that area that has created a lot of problems. Crime has happened. There's been parking issues. You mentioned it, Mike, there's been a cannabis factory on that site. And so my sort of submissions to this, what you call it, committee, is that the parking issues will be impacted further. There'll be further crime. There is already fear of crime of people. There's already strong objection from our agencies. There's objection from housing standards. There's objection from transport and local highways. There is also strong objection from the police, who have sent their views to the planning department. There's also residents there. There's been a petition of over 300 people who have said this planning application will have an adverse effect on their lives and their families and the community there. So my recommendation is to accept the recommendations to refuse this application from the office and move the recommendation set out from the officers.
Second that, Chair.
So it's moved and seconded. You might want to consider whether you wish to add any further conditions to the reasons for refusal, but that of course is up to you as the mover and seconder. You might want to consider whether you wish to include the fear of crime, which can be supplemented by evidence from the local police you might want to add that this HMO, were it to be granted, would exacerbate the parking already known to be an issue in Slainey Road. You may wish to consider that. Far be it for me to say. Councillor Abdul-Aziz.
Yeah, I think that would be considered and accepted. But one thing I would like to say on this, I support the recommendation of the officers. This isn't a HMO we're looking at. This is a super HMO we're looking at. 43 units, which could be occupied by more than one person, because it's not guaranteed that it's going to be significantly changing the nature of the whole street, perhaps even the whole neighbourhood. No, Plec has got too many HMOs already. This would significantly impact on everyone's life around that area. And one of the things that the speaker said that made me quite concerned, this is at the end of the road that leads into the park. You know, if families are scared to take the children past there, the use of the park would then become something that they would have to try and go all the way around to use. One of the attractivenesses of Slainey Road is that you live right next to the park and you take your children there. And the other thing we can't accept is our elderly residents being scared of what happens in that building. There is a fear of crime, and I know you're the master of the fear of crime. But if you look at page 191, the police sets out the case themselves, don't they? Say there is a fear of crime. There are the statistics there. You mentioned the cannabis factory, and it's interesting what the objector said about how it drained all the electricity. But yeah, so I fully support the officer's recommendation and seconding the proposal and adding on what you said, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Perry, Councillor Murray, Councillor Bott, in that order.
Thank you. And it's just really to endorse what Councillor Hussain and Councillor Nawaz has said, and to add to what's already in the recommendation 1, in terms of fear of crime. Obviously, you will be aware of the cumulative impact assessment for the town centre, particularly licensing related. However, if you look at the total recorded crime for the town centre, 3 of those streets are right in the vicinity of Slainey Road in Walsall. In terms of total recorded crime, all crimes for the town centre are linked to that area. So that will add more weight to that fear of crime. Absolute nonsense.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful of your remarks, Chair, at the beginning, that we have to consider this on planning reasons. And whilst a lot of the things that we've heard, for instance, racial abuse, now, whilst that's an abhorrent crime, it needs to be dealt with, but it's not a planning condition or a planning consideration, I should say. However, I'm happy to support the proposal that this be refused purely on the basis of the 3 sort of reasons for refusal that are given on page 193 and 194. So those reasons alone, plus what was said about the fear of crime, I'm happy to support the refusal. And it should give you some confidence, I think, that that comes from a councillor who represents an area over the other side of the borough where our problem is not HM. Well, it's not a problem. Please don't repeat that. Something that we have over in Aldridge is not a proliferation of HMOs. It's a proliferation of retirement homes.
Yes.
If there's a piece of land anywhere, somebody wants to build a retirement home. But not wishing to be flippant, I mean, that's a wholly different issue to HMOs. And take on board everything you've said about the type of people and racial abuse. But, you know, let's be clear, those aren't planning considerations. But the reasons for refusal are lot, plus the addition to do with fear of crime, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation to refuse permission. And I hope we don't have to sit here in future meetings going over it all again. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Bott.
Anybody from Housing Standards?
Yeah.
Got to answer the question.
You can ask the question. I might be able to give you an answer.
What concerns me, I've sat in this chamber for years and years and seen these HMOs come. And if you want to intervene and had further crime to stop these HMOs, all credit to you, Chair, this town would have been saturated with HMOs. We've got 2 estates now. The 3-bedroom properties have been turned into HMOs. They don't need planning permission, and they can put 6 people in a 3-bedroom property. Getting out of hand in this borough. You as the leader of the council and your cabinet need to do something about it. I think this council's at saturation point with HMOs.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I did have to get it to the House of Lords before I could enshrine it in the law of the land, but I'm now doing something similar with, as you know from the last meeting, for people who wish to care for their elderly residents or indeed their disabled family within the curtilage of their own property. That's with the Secretary of State at the moment. Somebody said to me once, when are you going to get united? I said, never will, because I keep upsetting people. But having said that, I think what we've heard tonight is very relevant. I've got Councillor Ghazanfar to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the officer's recommendations to refuse the application. I personally have a lot of concerns about the number of residents should be added to the street. And it's just not the 41 residents, there would also be staff. So staff parking, 41 cars possibly, and also visitors. So I don't think I can actually support this application.
Thank you. As I understand it, the mover and the seconder were to add those 2 conditions. One was the fear
Mr.
of
Chairman, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. There are 2 conditions added on the supplementary paper. I wondered whether the mover and seconder were content with those words.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
What page is that, Alison?
It's on page 35 of the supplementary paper.
Got it.
Thank you. There's 2 conditions proposed and then, sorry, reasons for refusal, I should say, and then a 4th one as well.
I did bring this up at the briefing, so I'm grateful to say that my extended supplementary paper does take that into account. I'm grateful for that. Councillor Summer.
Chair, I will be supporting the recommendation of officers to refuse. But just to give the residents some peace of mind, are we in that position to put a section 70 on this? So if this application does come before this planning department, they can fail to determine.
I think we've only, from memory, we've only had 2 applications, and a section 70 might be a bit premature. Would you agree with that, Alison? Sorry, Alison Ives.
Yeah, I'm just checking what the planning history was, because they only have a certain time within, if there's been a certain lapse of time between a refusal
Can I just
and another
perhaps I can add then that officers be instructed to examine whether a section 70 can be relevant and included? Yes. Okay.
Yes, of course.
We have that moved and seconded. Can I take a vote on that? All those in favour, please? The minutes record a unanimous vote. Save your counting, Paul. I can see his microphone now, Naz. Right, Alison Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee has resolved to refuse the application. That is on the basis of the officer's report and also the supplementary paper, including the additional reasons and amended reasons set out in the supplementary paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let the residents clear the gallery. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Councillor Gortasib. Right, we'll refer back now to the order of Javers Cliff, item 2.
Thank you. The proposal.
Sorry, members may recall this was before us a couple of committees ago, or maybe the last one, I don't know. And it was deferred for some design changes to accommodate, if possible, the heritage part of the report. So whether we need to go through it all again, I don't know, but certainly we need to see the changes that have been made. If Sally can, I think it's Sally doing this. Sally,
Correct,
can
yes.
those, please, Sally?
Yeah,
So,
you want me to go straight to those, Chair?
I think we'll see what we've got planned as a, if you could put that on the screen and then just refer back to what the amendments have been made since we saw it at last committee.
Yes, of course. Bear with me. So I'll just start by sort of like you said, Chair. The application previously came to committee on the 4th of November 2021 and was deferred by committee to consider a more acceptable design due to the location of the site within Lichfield Street Conservation Area. Like I said, amended plans have been received, which now allow for the application to be considered again by Planning Committee. In terms of the changes, we'll go through that now. And the proposed site plan, there are no changes made to the site plan. We can see here the access and the car parking remain as previous application. Here we can see the proposed north elevation. The red brick, you'll see later on from the 3D images, the red brick has been added to the ground floor, so that's been a change. Previously, this was glazing and a modern appearance. Here on the eastern elevation, we can see that again, red brick has been added to the ground floor here and the first floor element here of the proposal. On the southern elevation, again, we can see the material changes.
Sally, sorry, I've got to interrupt there. I mean,
Yes.
looking at these plans, we can hardly see them. Can you zoom into them, please?
Of course, of course. Is that better for you? I do apologise.
Yes,
all right. You didn't draw them.
So here we've got on the southern elevation, we can see that materials have changed on the ground floor here. Again, that's the red brick. Here we've got the western elevation, shows that the height has been reduced from 3 stories down to 2 stories adjacent to the Fountain Inn pub due to concerns relating to the overbearing impact on the Fountain Inn pub. The height has been reduced from 18 metres to 11 metres in total height for the 2 floors. Here we can see the proposed ground floor plan. No changes have been made to the ground floor plan as previous per the previous application. I mean the previous time it came to committee, sorry. The first floor has no change. Again, this shows as it was when it came to committee last time. Now I do need to sort of make it a little bit smaller so that you can see it a little bit better. The proposed ground floor, we can see a terrace has been added due to the removal of the 3rd story. So previously there was a 3rd story, like I said, adjacent to the Fountain Inn. That's been removed now. And we can see the terrace here on the top of the 2nd floor. No changes to the third floor of the main building. No change to the 4th floor of the main building. And no changes made to the roof plan. So here we can see the comparisons between the previous proposal and the amended proposal. They show a height reduction of 3 metres, overall height reduction of 3 metres, and we've measured that from being 25 metres in total height down to 23 metres. That's taking on board officer concerns regarding the scale and mass of the proposal within the conservation area. We can see here the changes to materials. So here the glazing and the reduction in glazing and the introduction of the red brick. We can see here the rest of the materials to the other floors have not altered. Again, we've got 2 comparison views here between what was previously brought to Planning Committee and the revised view. These show again the height difference is in changes made to the proposed materials. We can see here that we've got the red brick and here the large amount of glazing and the modern appearance, so to speak. It is acknowledged that the building sits within an area that does have modern buildings. The WHG building, for instance, is further down Littleton Street East, but that site is not within the conservation area, whereas this site is. And here again, another two comparisons shows the reduction. Here we would have where my cursor is, you can just see here, that's where the fountain in pub would be. We can see that they've reduced the height down to 2 meters, to 2 stories, sorry. We've got the red brick and we've got this terrace now above the second floor. The reduction in it's considered that the reduction in number of floors and the height is a positive amendment in relation to the scale and mass. Here, this elevation here, the eastern elevation, below this is Lichfield Street, which sits at a lower level to the site. It's considered that the reduction in height of the proposal is positive in relation to the amenity of the adjoining premises on Lichfield Street, and concerns regarding overshadowing have now been alleviated. This means that the refusal reason number 2 has now fallen away. Here we've got the site photos. You will have seen these previously, but this is taken from Lower Forster Street. Here we've got Littleton Street East. Here showing the residential block of flats on Lower Forster Street and a long view of Lower Forster Street. This is taken on Littleton Street East, and it shows that the prominent elevation of the site is at a higher level than the street. The fountain in pub and the site, the application site adjacent. This is taken on Littleton Street East, and we can see the WHG building in the distance. And this is taken from Lichfield Street. And here, behind this brick wall, is the application site, again highlighting that it is elevated. Overall, on balance, it's considered that whilst there have been positive amendments made to the proposal, that it's not considered that to be sufficient in order for the concerns regarding the impact on the Lichfield Street conservation area to be alleviated. Therefore, the application remains to refuse. The recommendation remains to refuse the application.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Mr. Malkin, are you going first or Mr. Singh? Right, 2 minutes, you know the rules.
Good evening, members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to address you again in relation to the revised scheme at the former Jabez Cliff site. As you will have seen, we've made significant changes to the proposal. These include the reduction in height of the building by 3 metres, which is given to the full floor. We've also removed the floor adjacent to the fountain inn, and have included a significant amount of red brick within the design. We believe these changes were as requested by members of the committee at the previous meeting. We've worked alongside the architect to achieve these requirements. We are pleased to know that officers now agree that no issues with neighbour will result from the proposal. However, the Conservation Officer still raises concerns regarding the heritage impacts of the scheme. Whilst the applicant has sought to accommodate views of members, and we feel that we have done so, we reached a position where we are unable to change the scheme further without making the proposal entirely unviable. Members therefore have a stark choice to make with regard to the proposal, and we hope that you approve the scheme, thereby supporting regeneration and inward investment into the town. It's perfectly reasonable for members to disagree with their officers on this scheme and come to a different view on both the impacts on heritage assets and also on the weight that should be given to differing planning considerations. As set out within the National Planning Policy Framework, where a proposal results in less than substantial harm to a heritage asset, as is the case with this proposal, this should be balanced against the benefits of a scheme. Our proposal will attract circa £10 to £13 million of investment into Warsaw and has the potential to create well over 85 direct and indirect. It's important to note there is no direct harm and certainly no demolition of any listed structures. We firmly believe that the benefits of this scheme clearly outweigh any identified harm, and this is a view that members can legitimately come to without stepping outside of established decision-making processes. We therefore hope that members are able to support the application and grant planning permission for this scheme. Thank you.
Well done. Singh, you wish to add anything?
Just to add on.
Speak into the mic, please.
Adopt the site. However, from a regeneration perspective, if planning is not granted, office players, i.e. this group, will not continue because we don't have planning. I find it sort of it's why got a town centre fund generated town centre and the other side with that purview. Can't do anything unless this nature granted to us. Simple as that. Can't add anything. Try our best. Generation out issue. All the other.
Thank you. Right. Questions to the speakers, please. Mr. Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, this is in my ward, so I'd like to say that. Just to either speaker, if you look at the reasons for refusal, there's a lot to say about the location. Such a significant location for the borough. Can you comment on some of those that the conservation officer is saying? Its impact on that area, its poor design, and also taking into account the building almost opposite the Queen Mary's building, which is a historic building, listed building. Its impact on that. Not if you want to comment on that, because I'll save some of the stuff later. So.
In terms of the design, I think we've worked very, very hard with the architects to get something that hopefully also can be proud of. The former building on the site was a red brick structure. We want to build something that is 21st century, has modernity to it, but we've also tried to get that red brick facade into it. And I think we appreciated members' views last time that was quite important. That does hark back to the heritage. But I think in order to put a pastiche traditional building on there, it wouldn't do the site and its sort of focal point, its landmark status any credit. And I think hopefully we've done enough with this design, and these are the small tweaks that we've done to convince you that we have got the sort of best interest of that site at heart.
Just like to add that master plan and our aspirations are the master plan and also certainly the based on the master plan.
Can I just come back? I mean, if you look at the first reason for refusal, it's a whole list of things they've put down that goes from sort of its scale, mass, bulk, height, design, representing poor design, visually detracts from the character, architectural and historical significance. Those are big words and big things to say. And in your answer to my first question, you've not addressed that first reason for refusal.
Well, we have addressed the mass sizing and clear from the planning officer. In terms of the facade, we addressed that also by introducing the red brick, which is reflective of the drawings that have been shown. However, your planning officer has failed to actually, we gave a slide demonstrating all the surrounding historic buildings, and the planning officer has failed to demonstrate that and maybe not had that visibility. It was certainly in our application. It was noted last time that they show all our slides in the application, so they're a bit missed by they're only selectively showed us 2 slides as opposed to the amendments of concerns of the conservation area and rationale behind it. There is, I think, showed about drawings around the area, and the architect had all in consideration from the industrialisation.
I haven't got another question, but just to say that everybody around this chamber knows the area pretty well because it's such a significant place. So we do know what exists around that area. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Hicken.
Could I ask why you was unable to raise the red brick facade an additional floor in height? I feel like that probably would have made a considerable difference.
I think the architect was quite concerned about sort of diluting the modernity of the scheme. And the attempt was to get some of the traditional red brick materials into the lower level, but extending that up higher. I think there was a concern that would affect the overall appearance of the building.
Mr. Samra?
How long is the site been derelict as it currently stands?
Been derelict probably 10 years. Added stock to that. Actually, we just picked up the drug users constantly fighting the battle into the site. This vandalism, although we've tried our level best to big fence around it and monitor the site, we still unoccupied.
Can I just say that, as I understand it, you've lowered this by 1 story. It would be normal for. Correct? Plan back up.
Please, that would help, I think.
Okay. You've lowered it by 1 story, and under permitted development rights now, you can add 1 story back on again without planning permission. However, not in a conservation area. Would you not agree that it's a subjective view as to whether this is an iconic building within the conservation area and complements something that will be renowned as an iconic building? And would you also perhaps confirm to me that you could use a red rubber brick, which then would match that of the Queen Mary's brick?
In terms of the ground, the brick, I'm presuming if members were minded to approve the application, a condition requiring approval of detailed materials would be attached, and we'd be happy to try and source a brick that would be a lot like the St Mary's building. I was going to answer the Councillor Nuaz about his question earlier. Design is very subjective, and impacts are very subjective, and that's how it's going to be. I think some people will look at this building and think, "Wow, that's fantastic," and others might think, "Well, I'm sure that," but that's architecture. That's how architecture works, and that's people talking about a building is much better than people just walking past it, not caring a drop for what you decide. And I think that's how everything is very subjective, and we hope that members feel that we've tried our level best and done a very good job of trying to put a decent landmark building on this site.
I've been living with the art gallery for the last 30 years. You either love it or you hate it, and that was hanging tile brick, hanging tile. At the time, people said, "Oh no, it's awful," and it's, "Oh, it's great." So I had a previous life. I had a brick cutting business. Hated it. But having said that, it is not beyond the wit of man to have the lower section of brick to match that. E.H. Smith do a good brick matching service, as you know, to match the bricks that Queen Mary's have got, which then would soften the blow and in actual fact would water down, in my view, the comments made by the conservation officer. But what do I know? Any other questions to the speakers, please? No. Questions to the officers then? Yes, Mark.
Just one question. I think I made my support clear last time, but just what weighting does this conservation have? It seems to me that we're trying to overcome a barrier that's constantly moving. Yeah. What weighting does the conservation area carry when we're comparing with regeneration, economic benefits, inward investment? You know, that the benefits go as long as you're armed, and we just keep using conservation. What's the weighting?
Sally, do you want me to come in on that one?
Yes, if you can, please, Mike.
Yeah, of course, happy to. Yep, sure, Councillor. So in terms of weighting given, they are a consultee, so they work for the Planning and Building Control Service. So it's part of the overall service that the council provides, but it's also a key consultee that provides us input through part of that process. In terms of the weight given to conservation and heritage in national policy, there's significant weight given to preventing inappropriate development and to preserve the character of heritage assets. So there's a high level national policy requirement to require significant weight to be given in those instances. But what we try and do when we work through all of the planning balances is to weigh up whether any particular benefits of a scheme outweigh the harm. And it's just that in this instance, whilst we've recognised that some of the improvements certainly go in the right direction, in our opinion, we don't feel that it's significant at this stage enough to outweigh those harms.
Just follow up on that, please, Chair. So if I could just clarify, it really is a very subjective judgment.
Yes.
It's not objective. It's a subjective judgment, somebody's opinion as against what they feel is fit.
Yeah, Councillor, if I can just come back on that quickly, just to say what I should have said at the end of that statement is, of course, members being a subjective position on materials have the opportunity to reach the different conclusion.
Can I just, before we, I think we've probably exhausted questions now. However, before we move to debate, can I just refer back to something Sally said? And she said, on balance. That says to me that there's a fine line to be drawn here. And the line is quite clear. Do we support regeneration and an iconic building, which could be the heritage going forward? It's today's building, but the future's heritage. As a result, you know, I find myself drawn to the fact to say the business of regeneration is something we should consider as a material planning consideration. Only because that's the comment that was made by the peer review who sat in this room in November and said that we, myself and the deputy and members, are up here for regeneration, but sadly there's a big void down there with the planners who are hidebound by legislation. At the last committee, we had something similar when we had two applications for annexes, for want of a better word, but it is a matter of subjective view. My view, for what it is, I think that if we were minded to support this, we could actually specify a condition that the applicant be directed to get bricks as near as possible to those that are the built environment of St Mary's, Queen Mary's, get it right. You said St Mary's, Queen Mary's, and of course the Arboretum itself. If you look at the Arboretum there, I could also say to you, because it's subjective, the Quest building opposite here is in a conservation area. So it was a bit short-sighted with that one, weren't they? You know, having said that, it is a matter for you to debate as to whether in actual fact you could support this or not. Take Councillor Craddock first.
Thank you, Chair. That road is full of iconic buildings, and I think this will complement the other buildings that are in there. It will make good use of the site. I think there's an attractive design being put forward by the applicant, and I would move that we grant planning permission based on the fact that it will improve the area. They've made every attempt to blend in with the conservation area, and it will provide employment and regeneration of that area.
You may wish to consider, if you would, an addition to that, in as much that we have to give reasons why we're going against the officer's recommendation. One of the reasons could be, of course, that you believe, as a member, that the applicant has gone as far as possible to accommodate changes which has reduced the mass and increased the aesthetic value of this particular iconic building. And also you could ask the condition to be that the brick facade that is being proposed, where the brick should be as near as possible matched to the bricks surrounding in the conservation area.
I'm grateful for your suggestions, Chair. I'm happy to
I'll
go with
second
those.
that then. Any other questions, please? Councillor Sandra.
Chair, I'd second Councillor Craddock's proposal there. Chair, this would be nothing but an improvement on the conservation area. There's a piece of land there that has been derelict for 10 years. It's fenced off. How can we even say that's a conservation area currently? Here we have someone who wants to invest in our town. And we constantly keep on hearing about the master plan, Towns Fund. You know, if big things are going to happen in this town, we have to support these schemes. So I would second the council.
I already did that.
Okay.
Alice.
I just wanted to come in. Obviously, there's been a move and a recommend and a second to support the proposals. I just wondered if we could ask if that could be delegated to officers to determine what conditions we might need to cover off any of our consultee concerns in relation to various.
Indeed, you can, and the delegation would be there to the spirit of the resolution being supported. If not, then it would come back to this committee. Councillor Statham.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add my thought on this. The investment, the inward investment, and you say it's a fine balance in terms of the weighting between the conservation area. I'd just like to point out, we all know it's across 8 lanes of traffic from the Arboretum. I believe the impact on the conservation area will be negligible, but the inward investment, the destination element of the venue, the generation jobs, on balance, sway it the other way. So I'll be supporting the application.
Mr. Creaney?
Yeah. For many years, we've sat here, these derelict buildings bought in front of us. We've got the Dainties, we've had my bird's famous Slainey Road. You know, and we fight these people to demolish it and redevelop it. We've got a building now here that's been sitting there derelict. We've refused HMOs on the fear of crime and other stuff. This has been used as a drugs den. I think the police would be glad to get rid of this. So will we as an eyesore. We should support it with officers' recommendations. If we're looking at regeneration, I agree with you. There is a fine balance between the area conservation and regeneration. So all I can say is that we work with the officers and approve this. Yeah, another one to refuse it, but it should be brought back to the officers. The applicant should work with the officers, and we should be supporting this to approve.
So the resolution is to move approval, but it to be delegated to the officers to finalise the conditions. But the spirit of the resolution, that the bricks to match the existing buildings in the conservation area, and that overall the regeneration of this particular site is a material planning consideration. Mr. Hickey, speaking to the resolution now? No? Oh, okay. Can do. Councillor Nawaz.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm concerned about this application, and it is a balance, and I understand inward investment, and that's what we want. I am concerned, and I'm happy that you have talked about the brickwork and the facade and how that looks. It's important that that's taken on board by the applicant and by the officers, because although I understand we want a iconic building, there must be a level of fusion between what's there at the moment, what's been there for many years, and what we're going to build now. A totally modern building that's out of place, it's going to be out of place. So I'm happy to support on the basis of the applicant and the officers who work together to look at the.
It's not beyond the wit of man. When I had that horrible brick cutting business I had, we actually built we did some skew back arches in the East End to match the properties that were still there, and we used Milton red rubber and Funton yellow. About that, Milton red rubber is a nice brick. So there you go. You didn't think you'd come across a brick expert, would you? So one of the conditions would be normal within a new build. Would the officers be approved the materials, the hours of operation, and also highway arrangement in view of the fact of the location of this on a very busy junction? So some of those would form the conditions that our officers would be looking. Paul Bottom.
Yes, Chair. I agree with what you've just said. Planning is going to be a major part in bringing this borough to a carbon neutral borough. I like the design. What concerns me, there's no report from an officer where this building could be energy efficient. There's a charging point for a car. Is the solar panels? With heating costs going through the roof, gas bills going through, we've got to start to look at giving planning permission on buildings that are inefficient. Yes. And that should be the way forward on planning.
It's building regs, really. What else?
Just going to say there are photovoltaics on the roof of the building. I don't know whether you spotted it on the drawing, but it's the entire roof is covered.
That's a good point. Maybe in future we could have a paragraph in the reports, Alison, just to say what the green credential. I think that'd save a lot of time. But as she said, there's photovoltaics, I have trouble saying that, on the roof, which are better than solar panels because they're smaller and they don't break. Vera.
Just wanted to say I pass through this junction every morning to get into Walsall, and the first building that actually catches my eye after I pass the Arboretum is the WHG building, and that is a modern building. So I do not feel this building will actually be able to character with the area, and as everybody else has said, it's going to enhance the area because of the building structure.
Thanks, Vera. I'll take Adam, then I'm going to take the vote because we all seem to be on the same page.
All right, to speak to the debate rather than the resolution?
Chairman, I'll let you speak. Yep.
Okay, I'll be voting against it. I think it's unfortunate that additional modifications wasn't made to the design to keep character from the street view. I think it'll drive a wedge between Queen Mary's and the Arboretum Gate and Park. Part of the conservation area, it split that into two. I think it wasn't beyond the wit of man to make the more distance, the views from the distance element of that building more with the red brick facade. I understand there's got to be some modern elements in there, and I think it could have been achieved as a nice balance. I don't think this design does achieve that. I think there was room for an additional compromise, and as such, I'll be voting against it.
That's called a subjective view. We respect that. Right. Yes.
Sorry, I was just checking, Chair. We're not sure whether there's a travel plan needed for this proposal because of the level of parking.
We're just going to delegate it to you.
I was going to say it might need a section 106. That's why I was just asking. I was going to refer to Katie Morton.
It can be conditioned. It can be section 106 is a bit of an anathema to me because it slows things down. If it is required, can you see whether it can be conditioned rather than a section 106? The bus station's down the road, the train station's down the road, and everybody who goes to WHG parks in Buchanan Avenue and walks. Right. I have it moved and seconded with the conditions being delegated and the addition which we've made about, or Steve Craddock made about the bricks. We're going to condition the travel plan. Keep quiet. Right. Have that moved and seconded. All those in favour, please. Two behind you, Paul. That's agreed. Alison? Oh, sorry, Alison Sargent. Sorry, I forgot we got two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control. This is contrary to the officer's recommendation in the report and the supplementary paper. The reason for the decision and for being contrary to the officer's recommendation is that the proposal will bring employment to the area. It will bring the regeneration of a derelict site and inward investment, and that it is considered that the design of the scheme will complement the adjacent conservation area, and that the impact on the conservation area by the proposed design is negligible. It is considered that the applicant has gone as far as possible to accommodate the changes from the previous refusal, and by reducing the mass and increasing the aesthetic value. The approval is delegated to the head of planning and building control, subject to conditions that the bricks match those of the adjacent Queen Mary buildings, which are listed buildings, and the Arboretum, subject to conditions relating to materials generally, hours of operation, and highway arrangements. It may also be necessary for a travel plan to be incorporated. Thank you.
And if the travel plan is required, we do our utmost to make it a condition rather than section 106. Right, we then have item 4, which is Great Bar Hall. It's been around, well, not the hall, but certainly the application has for a long time. While the speakers are taking the seat. Can I refer you back to, yes?
Just for my clarification, if I wanted a recorded vote, do I have to tell you now on this item, or do I have to do it before
If you want to what?
a recorded vote on this item?
Well, you struggle. Well, if you want a recorded vote in accordance with the Constitution, which I'm sure you've read, then yes. If you don't move the vote in accordance with the Constitution, the answer is no.
The question was, do I do it now, or do I do it further in the debate before the vote?
The Constitution is quite clear. I don't know why somebody wants a name vote. I'm not bothered either way. The Constitution is quite. Excuse me, sir. Are you filming in here? Sorry. Okay. Coming back to where I was, the Constitution is quite clear. If a name vote is required, you need 5 members of any committee to ask for a name vote. I see no reason to have a name vote on this, but you know, at the end of the day, it is a show of hands normally. It's on YouTube. It's pretty obvious from the hands that are going up, and it's all there. So, you know, I think we've got a long way before we get to that stage. There was a request to constitutional services, sorry, democratic services, from a member of the public. And as a result, I don't know the reason for that, but the Constitution was clearly outlined to that individual, and that's where we are. If you do anything outside of the Constitution, the decision can be challenged in a court of law. Right, gentlemen. We have a presentation, please. Can I just point out before we go that there is an extensive supplementary paper which I requested because of the sensitivity of this particular site, which happens to be in my ward. Mr. Winkle and I have known each other for many years, 30 plus. Having said that, I do apologise once more for the length of the report, but I did say to the officer I deemed it necessary in view of the fact we have a certain element of interest from a Member of Parliament.
Good evening.
Saw you, Michael. Oh, Sally. You draw the short straw tonight. He's frozen, I think. I'm bloody cold. Oh dear. This is why we have people doing presentations in the room. But can I say I was consulted, and Sally, bless her, has got a broken ankle and can't drive. So that's why she's not here tonight. Ah, good with us. Back in the room, are you, Sally?
Good evening, it's Anne.
Sorry.
Can you see the slide?
We can't see your face, and she's from Yorkshire, so you'll have to look at it carefully.
Yeah, you may need subtitles. I'm Anne Scott, a senior planning officer, not presented at committee here before, so just to introduce myself. So here we have the Great Bar Hall application. There's 2 applications, one for full permission and one for listed building consent. So here we've got the site constraints map. The site constraints essentially are the application sites within Greenbelt. It's also a grade 2 listed heritage parkland. There is the Great Bar Hall, grade 2 listed building, formerly the St Margaret's Hospital site. It's also within the Great Bar Conservation Area. It's an area of open space, site of local importance for nature conservation. There is also a tree preservation order on the site. Other constraints include pylons that run through the part of the site, and the lakes within the site are controlled waters under section 104 of the Water Resources Act and the Control of Pollution Act 1974. So here we have the aerial photograph, just to give some context to the site. Just need to reduce that down so you can see. So here is the site application, the red edge to the application site. Essentially, the application for restoration and alterations to Great Bar Hall. the listed building and the Grade 2 registered park, including the planning and listed building consent. So the application proposes creation of a hotel and wedding conference and restaurant as a result of the conversion of the existing building, restoring the lawns to get Great Bar Hall, two gatehouses, maintenance building and store, 57 new dwellings on the wider site, enhanced open space and nature conservation, an acoustic barrier adjacent to the M6, a boathouse, a summer house, and demolition of farm buildings on the site and installation of photovoltaic panels alongside the motorway. So here we have a section through the site just to show the sort of changes in levels. As I've mentioned previously, the application site's within the grounds of the former St Margaret's Hospital, which has been partly developed on to create a new residential estate consisting of 445 dwellings. The application site adjoins a wooded area within Grade 2 listed registered parkland and the Great Bar Hall estate. It's within Greenbelt, as I've previously mentioned. The proposals include works to Great Bar Hall, include repairing and replacing the roof structures, repairing masonry to the windows and doors, repairing and replacing render, repairing all rainwater goods and downpipes, installing new doors and windows in the external fabric, constructing new ground and first floors, including stabilising the cellar vaulting, consideration of the building is fully scaffolding the building enclosure because it's in a poor state of repair at the present time, considering so therefore temporary support for the building. Its historical value as a building is association with the original landowner Joseph Scott. He was a baronet in the late 18th century. The house was also known to be used for meetings for the Lunar Society for its prominent inhabitants. The actual building itself, being the Great Bar Hall, there's association with prominent architects of national recognition at some point in the past, including Sir George Gilbert Scott and John Nash, and also sorry, I'll move on because I've forgotten the name of the other one. I'll just move on to the next slide. So this is the layout proposed. It's the best sort of representation because the plans are all quite split. If the members have looked at the plans on the website, there's quite a number. Some are split, but this is the best one that illustrates the layout. I hope everyone can see. This is a proposed facade to the Great Bar Hall to the south and west elevation, and the north and east elevation. So this will form part of the proposed conversion. Just include this, increase this a little bit. This plan shows basically parking layout for the proposed wedding venue and conference centre. Some of it is quite significantly away from the main building along the Slainey Road. Just moving on to some of the proposed dwellings that I've taken just a random sample of the ones because there's quite a number of drawings. The proposed dwellings are more of an estate type development. Some are more grand than others. Some have a cottagey feel. Some are more akin to Regency style. A lot of them have garages, either a detached or semi-detached, or or ancillary to the house. Still substantial dwellings. These are some of the larger properties. The application also proposes some enabling development. The enabling development is essentially the residential development. It was intended to fund the restoration of the hall. So we have a slide of the photovoltaic panels and some of the proposed boundary treatments. This drawing or this plan is submitted by the applicant and intends to demonstrate really which part of the site is to be built upon, being the orange areas. Purple areas are areas of planting. Obviously got the lake sides. So the residential development primarily will be sort of around the perimeter of the site. And the photovoltaic panels and boundary acoustic screening will be along the periphery of the site, adjacent to the M6. So we have a plan of how the site used to look. That was a chapel. It's proposed to be demolished and replaced with a similar arrangement. And the state of the chapel today, which is unfortunate, has been, left in a poor state of repair. Just some photos across the parkland to the wider site, looking towards Great Bar Hall, which is in the distance there. And looking from the site towards the M6, so you can see there's, landscaping within the site. Some of the features within the site. Another view towards the M6. View sort of within the site. The access road. See that the site's constrained by there are pylons running through it, as previously mentioned. Chapel again. These are some of the photographs of the facade for Great Bar Hall. You can see that it's got scaffolding up and looking a bit in a sorry state. And that's a wider view of the Great Bar Hall. I'll just jump back to the site constraints plan. There are a number of changes to the reasons for refusal from the report, and also I should mention that we've had some late comments which are on the supplementary paper. So we have the Archaeological and Historic Environment Officer wishes to see if the application was approved, wishes to see a condition to record any unknown archaeology. Local MP Valerie Vaz has objected to the application. She wishes to see the application refused, considers it's in breach of the MPPF and local plan. And the fact that the application is proposed on Greenbelt when there's sufficient land to build elsewhere. There's also an amendment to the housing needs section of the report. Housing as an emerging housing supply shortfall recently failed the housing delivery test. However, the MPPF paragraph 11 and footnote 7 state that policies in the MPPF protect the land designated as Greenbelt and designated heritage assets should continue to apply in such circumstances. And the report also refers to paragraph 79 isolated homes. This should now be actually paragraph updated for paragraph 80. So as mentioned, there are updated planning reasons. Obviously, members may have had the opportunity to have a look at those. So I'll stop talking now, and I'll.
Thank you, Al. We followed most That's honestly, we'll get used to your accent. Paul Bott.
Right, I'm sorry to be awkward, Chair. I've missed off for that presentation. I wear hearing aids and I haven't watched it. I can hear you in here, but I just missed off for that. Can you give me an overview of what they want?
I can. I'm a bit mutton Jeff in me right here now, but yeah, it is difficult, and that's why I did say that wherever possible we have officers in the room to do the presentation. Councillor Sandler.
Sorry, Chair. On application, major applications like this, we have got officers here, and please don't take offence by this. Why aren't they presenting this case?
Because she's dealt with it. You know, it's been hanging around a long time. She's been, sorry, not the she, I'm not being rude. The planning officer has been drafted in to actually deal with it, which has been hanging around a long time because the staff shortages we have. She's a very experienced officer. And as a result, that's why this is such a composite report to make sure we get it right. I'm pretty sure I know where members may sit on this before we even debate it. But having said that, I think the point is well made that, you know, if we can make that point that our officers are here when doing presentations. Okay, well, let's take the speakers, if we may. Are you going first, Reverend Martin, or are you going first, Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of local residents who object to this application and who sent in nearly 250 individual letters of objection. There was no mention of these in the officer's report, nor objections from members of Parliament Valerie Vass and Tom Watson. Since being sold in 1978, Great Bar Hall and listed parkland has been purchased by owners whose decisions not to preserve and protect the listed building have led to its dereliction. They have gambled on being able to exploit this situation so that they can build luxury homes for themselves in the parkland with no access or amenities for local residents. This resulted in English Heritage downgrading the Liston Hall to that of the parkland, which gives the parkland priority over the hall when determining applications in future on this site. This application is not about restoring Great Bar Hall. It's about building 57 new houses in the Greenbelt on the back of a promise to build a copy of a Great Bar Hall 3 times its size as a wedding venue, but only in about 10 years' time. Historic England have stated this venture cannot be financed by enabling development. The estimated costs of 16 to 20 million pounds in 2016 have to be funded privately, which is considered not to be financially viable. Lapworths have been given every opportunity during this 12-year period to answer the issues raised by Historic England and the local authority, but they cannot, as there are no valid material planning reasons to support it. The report is clear. It provides a legal framework and guidance for members to reject this application. There are no very special circumstances. Enabling development is not supported. There are no material planning considerations in support of the proposals. It concludes that members should refuse this application, and I trust the committee will act in accordance with the legal guidance and officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Martin, Reverend, the same 2 minutes, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much. Obviously, the church is adjacent to the north end of the site, and it affects a lot of what goes on with us, and historically we're linked together. But much has changed in our knowledge of the area since the application was first made. The field adjacent to Chapel Lane has now been shown to contain 2 major underground electrical cables that go on to feed the Feezy. There's also a mains water system underground. Also, the overhead pylons which are there are the main artery going north and have doubled their voltage in the recent years. All these make it very difficult for any enabling development to take place on that part of the parkland, and therefore the plans will need to be revised in any situation. From the church, we're interested in the preservation of the parkland, its views, its amenity for the local residents, which may not be fulfilled in these plans. One section of the planning involved Gilbert's Wood, which was argued was a late addition, but since COVID, when we've been able to access the site. There is in many ancient features to that woodland, suggesting it is genuinely part of the ancient woodland over the area. Sutton's Drive is the main access route, and there's talk about changing it and parking facilities, turning facilities, including new gatehouses. But I don't believe the road itself is actually owned by the owners of the hall. And we have a right of access over the first part of it to access the churchyard. And indeed, some of the proposals would greatly affect funerals and access to the churchyard. The lakes have recently been refurbished because of the National Waterways Policy, but that's affected what goes on. There are registered white-clawed crayfish in the lakes which have to be protected. And there are all sorts of issues that need to be addressed which weren't in the original report.
Martin, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut you off. Not quite divine intervention, but I'm afraid it's the chairman's intervention.
Mr. Chairman, I have
pleasure.
come to the end of what I was going to say.
Well done.
Just hope the committee refuses.
I'll bring it up in the eulogy. All right. Right. Any questions to the speakers, please? Councillor Sammer and Councillor Sane.
Thank you, Chair. To either speaker, forgive me, I don't know the site. I've never been there. So the church obviously is on Chapel Lane as you enter the site.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay. We saw pictures of the hall and the derelict state it is currently. What and do you envisage, or would you want ultimately for this site to become, if it's not developed in one form or another over the next few years?
Can you put your Bob?
Sorry, I beg
Speak
your
into the
pardon.
microphone.
That's a very interesting question. For 30 years, property developers, including some of the national property developers in this country, have looked at the site to decide what they can do with it. Bovis, for instance, when they acquired St Margaret's Hospital, sorry, can you hear?
Hold it up.
Bovis, when they acquired St Margaret's Hospital, had the opportunity to purchase Great Bar Hall and the Parkland. They had the opportunity to turn the hall at that time into 11 apartments. There was a planning application there which I think went through, but they declined to do it. They sold it on. They let someone else sell it on. The receiver sold it on. So quite clearly, it's a difficult situation. It needs a lot of money. I don't think there's many benefactors would want to plough 20, 30 million into it, to be honest. It needs to be retained as a parkland because it's part of the Sandwell Valley extension and the Beacon Way.
Bob, can I just intervene there? The current thinking or the recent thinking of Natural England was because of the stated dereliction of Great Bar Hall, they were going to leave it as a ruin with storyboards saying this is what it looked like. That was what the current thinking was. It was downgraded from grade two listed star down to grade 2. The grounds themselves, it is believed, were designed by Capability Brown. As I say, the historic issue of the Lunar Society, which is James Watts, Matthew Bolton, people of that heritage used to meet here along at Soho House in Hampstead as well. Needless to say, I've lived with this, and that's why Bob and I know each other for so well. So that's the history of the site. If I was being honest, would 57 dwellings and the profit from that be an enabling development?
No, I mean,
No.
can I speak?
No, you can't.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. We have to say in the Constitution that it can be challenged, Bob.
Chair, maybe one for you. So is this site landlocked? When we talk about the grounds, can't access the grounds, can they?
Yes, of course.
I do that. When it was the hospital site, many of the people living in the area used to work in the hospital. The church used to run football clubs, scouts, guides at the hospital. Many people had an access to it. It wasn't public right of way, but there was an access to it. Many people remember fondly being able to walk over the fields and pastures and to visit the hall. Previous vicar used to take the Sunday school children to have picnics down by the lake and that sort of thing with permission of the family. So there's been a long history of local involvement. That helps the situation. People are, and since COVID, it's been open for people to walk and exercise in.
The Margaret's Hospital, as some of you may know, many years ago, was in actual fact a home where people used to, or a hospital where people unfortunately were locked away. It was an institution. Thanks to Mr. Prescott, we now have a housing estate at the Hall Park, which again is in my ward, and therefore this is part of it. That hospital has now been built on, it's gone, and Great Bar Hall, in my view, should have been addressed many years ago, bring it back to its former glory. But this isn't the only derelict building we've got with Grade 2 listing. So, any other questions for Commissioner Hussain?
Mr. Chair, thank you for your statement about this application. And like Councillor Samra said, I don't know this site really well. I'm trying to understand and reading the material. What are the main issues that you think this would have a big impact on you and your neighbours and residents there? You said that this land's been there's been problem over the years and it's been going backwards and forwards. How is it affecting you? And if it was granted today, how would it affect you further on your lives?
Either one of you, yeah.
I think for many of the locals, it's open parkland, which provide a green lung. The development would, by being around that, cut off the views, it would cut off access to that green lung. Yes, it was preserving some of the parkland in the centre, but it would be more restricted access. In fact, it was talked about being fenced off, so it would remove the access of people to that area, the woodland. It's got various natural parts of scientific interest. It's rich in flora and fauna. We had a churchyard survey last summer where we had in the churchyard over 100 different plant species. We have about 8 or 9 species of bats and other animals which have flourished because of the parkland. So building would remove a lot of that.
The questions, speakers? Vera?
Thank you, Chair. Would you object to the Great Bar Hall being put back into some good condition, or do you prefer it the way it is now?
Well, I think from a practical point of view, it's probably past redemption. If you were to see it inside and out physically, you would understand exactly how derelict it is. And I think now we've come to a point, as the Chair has suggested, possibly better to remain as a ruin. And other means in the parkland put to better use than they are now. I really think that the total cost of building this, even on a smaller footprint as it is now, probably beyond most people.
The costing going back 10 years was estimated at £1 million just for the hall. You roll that forward, you ask yourself the question, not for me to prompt you an answer, whether 57 dwellings, Mr. Winkle has said, would be enough to actually bring forward that enabling development, or is it just a ruse to get 57 houses into the Greenbelt? Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Is it your opinion that this place is gone way beyond being able to be restored? I think that's the opinion of the Civic Society. Consider that it is past redemption. We don't have a society like, for example, Middleton Hall, a different part of the West Midlands, was restored from being quite a wreck, caught at an early stage. Seems to have gone well beyond.
Yes.
So, is that, do you think, your considered opinion, non-expert, that it is beyond?
I think you've answered that, Bob. You've said yes.
Well, I'm a retired building surveyor, so I've had a good look at it over the years on many, many occasions, and quite recently. In my candid opinion, and in the opinion of Historic England, there's nothing left of any historic value to speak of. And to put it back, you'd be a pastiche of what was there before. It isn't quite the same as retaining the building. So my opinion is that it is past redemption.
Martin?
Can I add to that? The hall was never designed in one piece. It was, in its history, added onto at different stages, and therefore is very complicated in that way. We would have loved, and I know a lot of the locals would love it to be restored at one level, but also like to see some sort of local history focus, or the Scott family and the Lunar Society. At the moment, the church serves some of that focus because we have what remains of the history of the Scott family. But for most people locally, it's probably the parkland is more important than seeing the hall.
No, we're coming to Councillor Wise and we need to come down, otherwise we'll be here till 10 o'clock.
Thank you. You may have answered some of that. So what I was going to ask about is the value of this piece of land and the whole, the local residents. So you spoke about it being beyond redemption, the fixing it up again and making it into the again. And I want to just ask you, if that's the case, what is the value of that place for local residents?
Private property. Briefly then, Martin.
It is that green space. It has got the lakes. It could be used for outdoor activities. The lakes used to be fished. It could be a source of generating support and income that on that sort of level, rather than the cost of restoring the hall. I think there's still historical sellers to the hall and the way of life that began back in the 1600s. But how you preserve that, you could put a pastiche on top, but necessarily the scheme that's being proposed in this way.
So
I think for myself,
valuable locally, environmentally for
myself and my two colleagues who represent this ward, we believe that the gardens themselves are possibly all that's left worth preserving, that the building itself is, putting it bluntly, shot. Councillor Salmon.
Sorry, Chair, just again to understand this site, it is private, all of it is privately owned. It's
Yes.
all privately owned.
Yes.
So the only access to be granted is by trespassers.
Correct.
Thank you.
I don't think there's a right of way on there, is there? No.
Sutton's Drive
is not owned by the applicant.
It's not owned by the applicants. It's owned by Bovis, who have allowed people access. In fact, part of the development of Nether Hall was opening up the other side of the area, the parkland, to public access. So they have opened up the stream. They've put bridges in. They've put walkways in. So, given the historical parkland, of which the owners only own part, the other half has been opened up to public access.
That access comes from Nether Hall Park.
I just wanted to point out in the supplementary paper, there is an objection from the Rights of Way officer.
Yes.
And it does mention that the Ramblers have made an order to create a permanent right of way along Sutton's Drive.
Coming to that.
So they're claiming, continuous access. So
yeah. The rights of Ramblers, as we all know, very much like adverse possession. It has been used, rightly or wrongly, trespass you can call it, by Ramblers and the general public. And if that can be proved in a court of law, then a definitive right could be established. Sutton's Drive, as the speakers have said, is privately owned. Bovis own that, but the access to these grounds can be accessed through Nether Hall Park. There has been some work done on the freshwater crayfish, which are protected species. The lake had to be drained and whatever. But all the historic are there, but the decision tonight is whether you want to allow 57 dwellings on there as an enabling development. I think I'll bring you back to that focus point. If there aren't any more questions to speakers, I'm going to move over to the officers.
I've just got one yet to the speakers. Have you got an up-to-date ecology report?
The speakers wouldn't have, no. There would be an ecology report with this application, but the application will be with us for some considerable time. Has the ecology report been updated, Michael? No.
No, Chair.
Right. Any questions, the officers? I'll just say the ecology report did contain freshwater crayfish and other flora and fauna. I can't speak for newts, but that is also something. So I'll move over to debate. It is quite a sensitive subject, and I come back to the point that Bob Winkle made. You don't mind me calling him Bob, we've been friends and enemies over a number of years. The matter is, your consideration is, do you believe that 57 dwellings should be allowed on here as an enabling development to restore the hall as has been outlined tonight in the presentation? My view is no. What's her saying?
Yeah, you know this area better than I do, and I've been listening to the...
A little.
Yeah, you're the ward councillor, so looking at it and reading about it, it seems a very big application, and 57 dwellings is being mentioned, and it's green belt and open space. That would have a big effect on people there. I know in your statement...
20 acres, I think. Is the
sorry?
It's 20 acres, I think.
28
20
acres.
acres, Bob.
Whole site is 150 acres.
150 acres, yeah.
But the area they're talking about, because it's been split by the previous owner, is about 12 acres around the whole.
Thank you.
Yeah, and looking at it, and I think it would be a shame for people there to use sort of lose this land for his habitation, for the climate, for trees going to be affected, wildlife is going to be affected, so many species going to be affected, and also people's quality of life. So I think it's too big, the scale of this application, and the things they've got in, it's too much. I think it's going to have a big impact on the people there, on the residents there, and it will definitely have an adverse impact on their lives. I'm going to move, we support the office recommendation on this and not accept this application on that basis.
I'm happy to second that. Steve Craddock did. As we just heard, it is the total site is 150 acres. This is, to use this phrase, a thin end of the wedge. Should you be minded to support it, then obviously we don't know what would happen, especially with a Greenbelt review. Access is difficult off Chapel Lane, Sutton's Road, Sutton's Drive, as we just heard. But at the end of the day, I think it is right and proper resolution you've put. Councillor Bott.
Yes, Chair. Can you tell me what Sandwell involvement is?
It's on the border. The Scott Arms Junction, for those who have the displeasure of losing the will to live when you park by the traffic lights there. The division down the main A34, the right-hand side is Sandwell, the left-hand side is obviously Walsall, and they are consultees. As you get to this, it's just on the border between Sandwell and Walsall, so they are consultees on that basis. Steve.
Chair, I'm following on from Councillor saying, I mean, the objections from the planning officers, and particular number 3, which is they have not demonstrated any special circumstances for which these houses should be built. And I know they're trying to link it up to the hall, but that's a promise of something that we can't guarantee. And I don't think they've made any case any special circumstances for the construction of these houses.
Had committee have been minded, and we've got a resolution to refuse, had committee been minded to support it, I'd have insisted that a Grampian condition would be that the hall be restored before anybody builds a brick on any development. But there we go. John Murray.
Thank you, Chair. In all the years, or the few years that I've been on this committee, I don't think I've ever seen so many reasons for refusal. I mean, there's 2 pages of them. There's usually 3 or 4 at the most. So, you know, quite how we could put together a case for going against the officer's recommendation, I don't know. So I certainly will go with the proposer and agree with the officers that this should be thrown out.
Well, I'll put it to the vote. And although we're not going to have a name vote, I've read the room enough to know that it could be unanimous, which is probably better than a name vote. But I don't know. Right, all those in favour of the resolution to refuse? It's a unanimous vote of all the members present, which will be listed on YouTube for those who wanted the name vote. Bob, good to see you again. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to read out the result?
Yes, please, Alistair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control to refuse planning permission and to refuse listed building consent, and to amend and finalise those reasons for refusal, and that is set out in accordance with the officer's report and the extensive supplementary paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. Moving on then to item 6 on the plans list, which is 1 Bar Common Road. I have 1, 2, 3 other items with speakers, and the rest then are without.
Chair,
You've got 2 minutes. You're going to fag. No, he did that. I don't want to go in there for a fag. I know, Vera. Mr. Evelyn. Thank you. We're moving on to live now. Right, to item 6, and after item 6, I will take item 8 because the gentleman who's representing on item 6 is the same gentleman who's doing item 8. We all follow that. Right, item 6, please. Number 1 Bar Common Road in Aldridge.
Hi, my name's Leah Wright. I'll present in this item. So the subject site is 1 Bar Common Road, and the application is for a replacement dwelling. The reason for it coming to committee tonight is being called in by Councillor Pardeep Kaur on the grounds that the application needs delicate judgment. As you can see on the screen, there's a constraints plan. Can you is it echoing? There you go. So as you can see on the it doesn't. It is. Oh. Okay, I'll start again. So as you can see on the screen, there's a constraints plan. So the dwelling is within the red line. It's within the West Midlands green belt. There's an area of TPOs, which is tree preservations order, to the northwest of the site. So this is an aerial of the site. So the subject site comprises a detached dwelling site to the southwestern side of Bar Common Road. The street scene is characterised by a mix of residential properties, and these differ in style and size and are constructed of a variety of materials. There are residential properties, residential apartments, sited off of Bar Common Road, and these are located on Winchester Mews, which is this building here opposite the site. So this is a site location plan as existing up here, and as you can see, this is the block plan as proposed. Again, just to reiterate, the proposal is the erection of a replacement dwelling. So these plans show the existing elevations and the existing plans. The dwelling at present has a hip roof with multiple gables and is constructed from brick and render. The property also benefits from an in and out driveway, which I'll show you some photos of later, and a large garden to the rear. These are some proposed elevations. So the replacement dwelling would measure 6.92 metres in maximum height, to have a dual pitched roof, eaves of 2.5. You can see the large gable to the feature to the front and rear. And the dwelling would measure 21.56 metres in width and 19.34 metres in depth. To the east elevation, there are going to be various windows and a door proposed, and to the west elevation, just a single window. To the rear, there's some roof lights, a central glazed gable features, as I said before, a dormer, and 3 sets of bifold doors. In terms of the internal arrangements, so there'll be an entrance hall, formal lounge, boot room, bedroom with ensuite and walk-in wardrobe, family room, living area, kitchen, spiced kitchen, and double garage. At first floor, there'll be 2 bedrooms and an ensuite, 1 other bedroom without an ensuite, a family bathroom, and a landing. So in terms of photos of the site, so this is the front elevation. It's set back from the street. This is a more detailed picture of the front elevation. This is the neighbouring property. This is 1A Bar Common Road. A few more pictures of the front of the dwelling. And then this is the in-out driveway that I was referring to previously. This is the rear of the dwelling at present. This is the adjacent fields, and you can see there's some rubble on site as well. Another image of the adjacent fields just to show that it is within the green belt, and those are the tree preservation orders I was referring to previously. And here again, some more images of the field. So here we're back at the proposal. So in terms of the principal development, it would add to the supply of houses that could be supported by paragraph 60 of the NPPF, but this would be subject to it representing appropriate development in the green belt. So paragraph 149 of the NPPF states that a local planning authority should regard the construction of new buildings as inappropriate in the green belt. One exception to this is the replacement of a building, providing the building is in the same use and not materially larger than the one it replaces. And as such, this proposal should be has been assessed, against the existing dwelling based on its size at present. So it will be in the same C3 use, which is a dwelling house, and therefore would meet this first criteria. However, when we move on to the second criteria, the replacement dwelling is materially larger than the dwelling it is to replace. So it's 189% larger in footprint and 214% larger in volume. I just added this in for clarification. So in terms of footprint, that was 148 square meters or 1,593 square foot, and the proposed would be 428 square meters and 4,606 square foot. We've also considered design as dwelling would be larger in height and depth and would raise the ridge of the dwelling. The existing vehicle access would be enlarged and the curtilage would remain the same. We have considered that replacement dwelling is material larger, as I've said previously. We also think that it would be incongruous in appearance, being a modern and overly stretched house, and would appear at odds within the street scene. Also to note, these glazed on the front and rear, as you can see in the elevations, aren't typical of this countryside area, which would allow views from the wider green belt. In terms of amenity of neighbours, this has been covered up in the report. It meets 45-degree angle, and it wouldn't result in an overbearing nature to neighbours, nor result in overlooking. And as such, we consider it to be acceptable. In terms of amenity of future occupiers, it met national space standards. The bedrooms were single standard, but they were large, so they would allow for adequate light, and they also had unobstructed outlook. From a trees and ecology and highways perspective, and also ground conditions, all considered acceptable, and there were no comments received from neighbouring properties. So we have used this application. That's what we've put forward. So we've refused this on inappropriate development in the green belt and an incongruous form of development and harm to the character of the area and to visual amenity.
Thank you, Leah. Rattle through that one quick. Can I formally move a resolution, first of all, that we suspend the standing orders to complete the agenda? I'll take a vote on that then. It's 3 hours in 10 minutes time. That's the resolution of the Constitution. I'll move that. Do I get a seconder? All those in favour? Anybody against? I'm with you, Steve, but I've got to be here. Okay. Mr. Singh, you have 2 minutes. You know the rules, so I won't bore you with them.
Chairman, thank you. I've acted as agent for 8 months, and since my involvement, we've not received any correspondence outlining any concerns or requests to amend the plans. Indeed, the scheme's only been brought to committee due to delays by the council in determining the applicant. The starting position in support of the proposed development on this occasion has to be the planning committee report. Learned committee members will note that the officer report starts by stating that the proposal would add to the housing, so it could potentially be supported by paragraph 60 of the NPPF. Elsewhere in the report, it states that a replacement dwelling is a C3 use, the same use as the existing dwelling, and this would be acceptable. It is significant to note that the officer report confirms that there's been no representations and indeed no neighbour objections. The council's highway officer supports the proposal and the tree officer does not object. Equally, key statutory consultees, including Severn Trent Water and West Midlands Fire Service, do not object. In the officer report, we're told that the development does not reflect the design cues of the existing dwelling it is to replace, nor does it respect the character of the surrounding area. Yet in the same report, we're told that the area does not have a distinct style and there are dwellings of multiple styles, sizes and constructed of various materials. Indeed, the building opposite is 3-storey. Chapter 13 of the NPF states that the fundamental aim of the green belt is to prevent urban sprawl. We refer the committee members to the volumetric table. Members will know that a proposed development proposes a 1.6 metre increase in height and a 0.11 reduction in width. In essence, this is a bungalow outside of a conservation area. There's no special assets. The house is not of any special or vernacular significance. The windows are all UPVC and the door is a composite plastic. The tiles are cracked and the render is damaged. We advocate that planning permission should be granted for a development that achieves the benefits, providing much needed family accommodation in an efficient and effective location. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Questions to the speaker then, please. Do you have any? Samra?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Singh, under the new permitted development rights, could you not apply for a complete floor on this bungalow, as you've said it is? Correct.
Yeah. I mean, in essence, the government's obviously changed the GDPO, General Development Permitted Order, and it does allow first floor extensions provided the site's not in a designated area. Obviously, it's new legislation, and my understanding of what's a designated area is it in a conservation area? Is it a listed building, or an area of outstanding natural beauty? The fact that it's in Greenbelt doesn't itself mean it's in a designated area. So I believe that because there's been no changes to the actual roof of this bungalow, you could actually, under the new permitted development order, apply to develop the whole first floor and raise it. And in actual fact, that would probably make it taller than what we're proposing to do, because you would have the existing roof as well as the additional story on top. So yes.
What's up?
Mr. Singh, the officer's report mentioned that this is a replacement dwelling. Is this actually what is being proposed?
Thank you. No, I mean, obviously, we haven't submitted a full plans application. This is a householder application for extensions and alterations to the existing house. So the intention is not to replace the existing dwelling, although there are substantial extensions being done. The fabric, the outline, the front wall would stay, and we would obviously build on the back of that.
If the applicant would be happy to have a planning conditions attached to help address the officer's concerns?
Yep, we think any planning conditions that the council want to put forward or the officers suggest should be put forward, and the applicant would support it. The officer report mentions a concern over the bin storage, and it says that could be addressed by having a planting scheme. It's important to know that obviously the ecology and tree officers are not objecting, but if it was felt appropriate to have a planning condition that would perhaps have a landscaping, a hard and soft landscaping plan, and it's felt that that would address some of the concerns, we would welcome that. Thank you.
Mr. Singh, you said earlier that there is, if we could, Leah, just get the plan back up of the surrounding area, that this area is quite unique in the sense that there's no uniformity. There's buildings, as I think you alluded to, there's some flats, 3-story flats right across from this property, and other dwellings that are quite considerably higher. I think the report also does say that there's no overbearing to neighbours or that any breach of the 45-degree line. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yeah, I think as the case officer has sort of alluded to, the area is, well, if we look at the officer report to start with, it's a little bit contradictory in the sense that it does say that the design proposal doesn't reflect the vernacular of the area. But at the same time, I think the officer report also says, and it's been said this evening by the officer, that the area is not uniform. Immediately to the immediate neighbour is a 2-story dwelling. Opposite, you've got a 3-story block of flats, if you like, apartments. And the whole road is full of a mixture of houses of different periods. So one could possibly even suggest that the bungalow is indeed the alien feature here. It's the bungalow is what's unusual, and 2-story houses is what the area's sort of, more commonly known for. I hope that answers the question. It's probably also worth adding that the plot itself is actually quite large. If you look at the site location plan that you've got before you on the screen there, and if you compare that to the houses to the right, for example, the site location plan takes up 2 or 3 of them dwellings to the right, and those are 2-story houses. So it is a large site, easily able to accommodate the proposed development. Thank you.
Mr. Singh, you've appeared before this committee on a number of occasions now. You will also be aware that in relation to what Councillor Vasava said, our officers consider this to be a replacement dwelling because of the substantial extensions that are proposed. Is that correct? Whether I agree with it or not is another matter, but that's...
Indeed. I mean, I think it's fair to say that obviously when we submit a planning application, it's down to the council to take a view on the development description, and it's not unusual for them to classify a development that has, large extensions as a new build.
Any other questions to the speakers, please? No? Are there any other questions to officers then, please? Councillor Aftab-Nawaz.
Yeah, I mean, I get a bit, becomes a bit awkward when applicants say the officers haven't give all the information. So I'm going to ask the officer, did the applicant get all the information that he needed beforehand? Because the applicant was saying that they hadn't had any notice or whatever the applicant had said at the beginning. So I just want to know whether he worked with the applicant or not, and was he aware of issues?
I had spoken to the agent quite frequently about this, and I had asked for various calculations about the green belt so I could make my assessment. I don't think these were provided until November time, and then that was when it has come to committee now, when we've made a full assessment. So we have been in talks with the agent throughout the process.
Alison, can you just clarify for members of the committee or Michael? Obviously, this application has been in-house a long time. I presume, I don't know the answer, I presume it had a previous officer before Leah, or was it in actual fact one of those was sitting in the backlog?
Yeah, certainly, Chair, I can pick that up. There has been some movement in officer cases, and certainly in recent months due to staff shortages. So unfortunately, whilst it's been with the same officer for the same period, it has meant that we've not been able to focus on this particular one whilst other applications have come into that case officer.
And just for the members of the committee, how many applications do you currently have in roughly?
Well, each case officer at the moment's got between 70 and 100 cases, which is absolutely unmanageable. So if you can appreciate, that's why we are getting a lot of inquiries about this, and we are transforming the service with the service transformation plan, and we are actually today, hurrah, we're advertising for some new posts within the service, but that's the reason they've got very high caseloads.
Chair, sorry.
That addresses the issue of why this one's been a long time. Thank you. Mr. Samra. No?
Alison just brought a point up there, not relevant to this application. When we get a lot of inquiries from our residents, that's, we say if we're okay to quote that figure, 70 to 80. And can I just ask, sorry, Chair, again, I know we're moving away from the application here. Then what do they do? One day they pick up one, they pick up another. I mean, how does it work?
Because of the committee cycle, and obviously we try and focus on those key schemes that are adding to the regeneration of the borough, we're constantly on a cycle of preparing for those committee reports, and then we'll sort of get other applications done in the meantime.
We are looking at changes to the constitution in as much that we get many residential applications coming in. We've seen that tonight, where they take up a lot of officer time, when in actual fact they could have been dealt with under the delegated authority. But we are looking at that. Alison's quite rightly said, I have put more money into the budget for planning into the resources in planning from the budget that we're now looking to go to council in February. I just wanted to clarify, so there's no misunderstanding why this has taken so long to get to committee. I'm afraid that Mr. Singh's application is one of many. Any questions to the officers? No? Right. Moving to debate then. Any comments from members? To Samra?
Chair, I'm going to move that we approve this. And on these grounds, I mean, the scale of the plot there, we saw earlier, and again, if Leah could just flick through some of the pictures of surrounding, there's no uniqueness around Barkham Road, Longwood Road, or Sutton Road. We've had many applications come before us, very similar to this, where the argument has been used about the greenbelt. I see no significant harm to any greenbelt from this development. We've also heard possibly that they could extend anyway under the new PD. I said possibly. There's no objections here at all. No overbearing, the report says. No 45 degree breach at all. So I would formally move that we approve, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, it's gone silent.
Sorry, Alison.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. After Councillor Samra spoke, we can't hear anything else. I don't know if the microphones are working.
Yes, Councillor Salmon has moved the resolution that it be approved for reasons that it doesn't contravene the 45-degree rule, that it is a dwelling that could be increased on the first floor under the new permitted development rights, and that it is not unique in the Bar Common Road in itself, and that effectively it would enhance the area. I think that's what he said, or was that effect? That was seconded by Councillor Harris. Oh, you've moved now, okay. I've got Councillor Murray to speak. Sorry, Alison, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there is a reason for overturning the impact on the harm to the green belt by virtue of the 214% increase in the footprint. Also, if we are going, if the committee want to support the proposal, then I would ask that that support is delegated to officers to address any conditions that are deemed necessary.
Okay. Wish to address that harm to the green belt?
Chair, I think the report already alludes it's being built on the existing footprint currently already. Again, if we could bring the picture up, Leah, of the actual.
I think the office is referring to the volumetric increase of 214%.
Yes. Well, Chair, on that, very similar applications have come before this committee quite recently around this area, where they've been deemed, as the report says, that they're causing harm. In my view, there is no significance, because they could increase this anyway, quite possibly under the PD regime.
Well, that's a possibility, as you say. It isn't I'll ask officers to address that if you wish, but Mr. Singh has already said that in the fact that it's in the green belt could very well be interpreted as being a designated area in accordance with the NPPF. Right, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chairman. There are only two sort of reasons for refusal before us this evening. One of them is the incongruous form of this development, which, as we've seen, I don't think there's any doubt that it is doubling in size. But the other reason for refusal is the one that bothers me, which is the inappropriate development in the greenbelt. Now, like many members here, I would hope all members, I spent a lot of time last year fighting and objecting to what was called the Black Country Plan. Now, this was foisted upon us with the view of building houses and developing on greenbelt. And as I say, I spent a lot of time and a lot of my own money with leaflets, organising, and urging residents to object to the Black Country Plan, because we don't want all of our sort of greenbelt, our small amount relatively to some leafy shires, developed upon. So now, okay, we may say that, well, oh, this isn't, we're not building 27 houses in a field or anything. We're just replacing one house with another. But however we try to dress it up, it will be considered as inappropriate development in the greenbelt by everyone out there, by everyone, because that's what it is. Now, I personally, and I can only speak for myself, as and when the Black Country Plan is represented to us, when it takes on board all of the objections and all of the consultation, which will be sometime later this year, I would feel a complete hypocrite if I was to then go to all my residents and say, get out there, object to all this, sign up, do this, come and help me deliver leaflets. I would feel a complete hypocrite having objected to development in the Greenbelt last year. I will be objecting to development in the Greenbelt in the coming year. And then I could sit here and say, I'll go against officers' recommendation to refuse this. I'm not going to do that. I don't think I'm a hypocrite. I hope I'm not. And so therefore, I will definitely be voting against the proposal. I will be voting with the officers to refuse this permission. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Alison Sargent. I wonder if I might ask a question to the mover and seconder. Because the harm to the greenbelt is enshrined in statute, it is inappropriate, not considered to be inappropriate. I will need the reason for overturning to address what the very special circumstances are, as that is the only test.
Okay.
So we have to have very special circumstances to overcome harm. If the mover and seconder could provide those very special circumstances, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to some of the discussion around fallback, which may help members' discussion here. So the PD fallback for a bungalow is only 3.5 metres, which is substantially different to what can be built on under this current proposal of 2 stories. So as a fallback position, just a question to whether we would consider that would be a significant fallback position to warrant what's before us as a 2-storey substantial increase in footprint, which then triggers the greenbelt test. So just to sort of say that alone, from our experience, wouldn't stack up in terms of overcoming the greenbelt position that we've set up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison, for your intervention, because I was going to ask that question. I cannot see anywhere in this report where those exceptional circumstances are set out, or in the way that gives me confidence that they are demonstrated. The summary greenbelt assessment is very clear. I think this is a very sound officer judgment. And again, we often talk about the thin end of the wedge in relation to greenbelt. And this is one of them. If you even look where the location is, it is the thin end of the wedge. And like Councillor Murray has said, I'm not a hypocrite either. And I have strong views on greenbelt, whether that's greenbelt building as proposed by the Black Country Plan, or whether it's actually extending into the greenbelt, as I've seen myself in some areas of my own ward. So I will not be supporting this and support the recommendations of our officers. I think this is a very sound judgment.
Can I just say that as I will be one of those people determining what we're going to do with the Black Country Plan, I'm going to say silent on that, but I do take on board everything that Councillor Murray has said. I think the worry I have here is I have personal experience in my own road where the volumetric increase in some properties has been substantial. There's one down the Broadway, which Councillor Samra has raised with me himself, where there is a house there which was done under delegated authority, which is huge. And I have to say, Councillor Rose Martin many years ago used to complain bitterly about houses that were being pulled down and volumetric increase of this nature. And I used to poo-poo her at the time, but she was right and I was wrong. Character of the area is always very important. And yes, it is fair to say that Bar Common Road, both ends are different. We've got some new builds down the end, which is the Erdington Road end, which was an old garden centre. And then you've got this at the other end, which is towards the central Wallbridge. I think that the officer has pointed out a 214% increase, puts it to 4,000 square feet from, I think from memory, you said 1,800 at the moment. Won't be pedantic on that. So that's the consideration you have to make. And obviously that is a subjective view by everybody. So therefore, I think unless there's any other comment, no, I say no more. So I have it moved and seconded that we agree that this be approved against the officer's recommendation. I'll take that vote. All those in favour of the resolution? And those against? 2 behind the poll. So therefore, it is my duty to move the officer's recommendation as set out. That's seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. You're the ward councillor. All those in favour of that recommendation? Against? No. Right. Sorry, Mr. Singh. Here we are. So you now have 48 Mellish Road as owners. Oh, sorry, Alison, would you like to read that, please? Alison S.
Mr. Chairman, the committee has resolved to refuse planning permission. That is for the reasons and in accordance with the officer recommendation in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. 48 Mellish Road falls to you again, I think, Mr. Singh. You doing this one, Michael? Right, thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay.
I was waiting for Mr. Salmon to walk, Councillor Salmon to walk back in. He hasn't, so he can't vote on this. Oh, he's already declared interest. My apologies. Yes, I advised him earlier.
Thank you, Chair. So 48 Mellish Road, the site plans on the screen. You can see there are a number of protected trees to the front and the rear of the site, and a number of others in the local area and street scene, which you'll see in some photographs and more plans a little bit later. So the site is on the corner of Rushwood Close and Mellish Road, as you can see. See some more context of that as we go through the rest of the presentation. So that quite clearly shows the area is very leafy. There are some significant mature trees, which are classed as groups of trees of particularly high value amenity to local residents. Again, you'll see some more details of that as we go through the presentation. So the reason for bringing to committee, called in by Councillor Nazreen on the grounds that the application requires delicate judgment, and the proposal is for a two-storey and single-storey rear extensions. So it's built in the same style as others on Rushwood Close, with the dormer window projecting from the front and rear. The property sits forward of the building line along Mellish Road, meaning the neighbour at number 50 projects further to the rear than number 48. There are side-facing windows that would look out onto any rear extension, however, those are obscurely glazed. The protected trees I've mentioned, and that includes 9 protected lime trees along the boundary between number 48 and 50 Mellish Road and 1 Rushwood Close. So the proposal is larger than previous schemes. We have had applications at this property previously, and would impact on protected trees, which I'll go through in some more detail as we go through. Previous permissions were amended or reduced to accommodate the protected trees within the site, and the applicant's own submitted tree impact assessment demonstrates and in fact confirms the proposal would have significant harm to the trees. Those trees do have multiple vantage points in the street scene and are of high amenity value, and again you'll see that as we go through some of the photographs. There has been an appeal which the inspector agreed with the council that the protected trees should remain and not be felled as proposed, and that was because of the high value amenity of those trees. Small amendments have been made to this current scheme and do not address the previous refusal reasons, and there are some comparison plans that we'll show you in the presentation of what was previously put forward. In terms of the presentation, these are the existing plans and elevations. So it's a dormer style bungalow. These are the proposed plans and elevations. So you can see at the back there, the proposed increase in height, so 2-storey element, and then the single-storey extension at back. So this plan shows you a comparison of the previously refused scheme. So back in 2019, that's the rear elevation. And then you can see the rear elevation of the current proposal. So very similar, and similarly with the side elevation there. So this was following 6 amendments. Apologies. Let me start that again. 19/12/20 was the approval. So this is the comparison with the approval. So the rear elevation, if you're looking at it face on, you can see some similarities, but actually when you look at the side elevation, you can see that it's been moved away slightly from the boundary. But that was the result of a number of amendments before we got to an approval. So this shows what was approved. So that was the starting point. After negotiation, this is what was finally approved on the left-hand side as part of that application versus what's currently proposed. So the point we're making here is you can see that what is currently proposed is very similar to the starting point that was deemed unacceptable back in 2019, hence the negotiated scheme on the left-hand side. So this shows the impacts to trees. So you can see some of the root protection areas there and how some of the proposal would encroach those trees and would result in harm or potential harm to those trees within the site. That's the existing front elevation of the house. Context with the neighbour to the left-hand side. This is the context, wider context with Rushwood Close. So you can see they're all of the same design. And again into Rushwood Close. This is the shared boundary with number 1 Rushwood Close. You can see the garden wall and the side boundary rungs along Rushwood Close like the application site. Same original design as the application house, however has been extended, but the character and design retained at first floor. So the rear elevation of the application bungalow, the side elevation with number 50 in the backdrop. So again, you can see the difference in the building line of the application house. And again, just some more context photos in relation to the closest neighbouring property. So this diagram shows the proposed extension and any potential patio that would lead out from that and their proximity to one of the protected trees. It also shows those non-habitable windows at the adjoining neighbouring property. So concerns have been raised by neighbours about loss of light to those windows. However, they serve non-habitable rooms. I believe it's hallway and stairs and landings, which wouldn't obviously be given the same level of weight. So this is the proximity to the crown of the tree at first floor, so you can see how close that would be. And you can see the garage at the end of the garden that's proposed to be converted. That's quite a helpful picture of the group of those protected trees, which the inspector agreed are of high value amenity and should be retained. And these are the 3 trees that are likely to be damaged or with future pressure for ultimate removal because of the proximity to the proposal. So in terms of the assessment, there's no objections from the local highway authority on parking matters. Pollution control would require, in any approval, to address the installation of a solid fuel appliance and to agree a construction management plan. But we do have concerns and objections from the council's tree officer for the reasons we've set out for the impacts to the trees. We've had 2 representations from 2 neighbouring occupiers raising concerns on the loss of light to the side facing window and to the proposal. We've talked about the impact to the side facing windows in terms of where we stand on the remaining refusal reasons. So whilst one of those has fallen away, we do consider that there are still a number of refusal reasons on this scheme, and I'll run through those in the supplementary paper. So there's updated comments from the tree officer. I won't read those for you, they're in the supplementary paper, but essentially it reinforces the position that the trees are at risk if this proposal goes ahead. And we have an amended refusal reason 2 as well, which results in an update to the details for that one, for the trees. And the recommendation remains to refuse planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. like to start with saying I've lived in the house for the past 15 years. I love the property. I love the location. For me and my family, this is a forever home. I've got friends and family who live on Slainey Road, on Rushwood Close. I have 2 children who go to local schools. We as a family need the extra space, but more importantly, I also have elderly parents, which I'm doing the extension for, who are 70 plus now. My mum's a blue badge holder. She's got maneuverability problems, so I'm looking to move her into my family home. And also my dad has memory loss, so this extension is not only for my children, but my elderly parents. I think this would bring our family closer together. And as they're getting older, they need more support. My wife works locally in the community part-time. She will be supporting them as they get older. And I just ask you to look at this application more favourably. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm only going to make 3 points. The first one is the first reason for refusal is that the 2-storey rear extension presents unacceptable. As you would have seen by the officer this evening, a previous extension in 2019 was granted consent. That extension was for a 2-storey rear extension and a 1-storey rear extension and a garage conversion. We say that there's a substantial amount of similarities between them applications. Effectively, the homeowner is looking to create a 4-bedroom dwelling on the first floor with an office. It's relatively modest given the scale of the plot and the size and the neighbouring properties. The second reason is the potential impact on the trees. And the point we want to make here is this. The applicant has submitted and had approved an 8-metre prior approval application. So he's been given consent to go back 8 metres. And obviously the current proposal is only to go back 5. So any harm that obviously the extension at 5 metres would do, surely it's less than the prior approval at 8. The third point I want to make is there's concerns about the views from Rushwood Close. Provided a unilateral undertaking, and what that's designed to do is to help ensure that the visibility and the impact or the potential harm is mitigated by retention of the existing vegetation on the close. We propose that a planning condition, a unilateral undertaking be provided that ensures that the existing boundary that's about 2.3, 2.4 metres, plus the vegetation that's about 3 metres, is made to stay in place. That would substantially reduce the impact and the visibility to any neighbours. Thank you.
Right, any questions to the speakers, please?
So, the agent or the applicant. So, when the original application came forth, you say was agreed, yeah, was granted. Were the trees already there?
Yes. Yes. The trees have always been there. Yeah. The trees were there.
Obviously. So, at that time, was there any concern expressed by officers in regards to harm to the trees? And
not
if
that
so, what was the mitigation that you put?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
So the officer in this case is saying that there's going to be harm to protected trees. And obviously that seems to be one of the big reasons there. So can you just reiterate to us how you're going to stop harm?
Thank you. We would propose that planning conditions can be proposed here, such as a no-dig solution. So we can ensure that the extension is dug using non-proprietary mechanical equipment, i.e. a hand dig solution. So any roots or any protective roots that are discovered are protected and taken care of, during the course of construction. Secondly, we've had other examples that the officers have applied in other situations where they've requested and insisted that there's protective fencing put in around the tree zone. There's no materials put underneath the canopies of trees or stored in the proximity of trees. And these are all planning conditions that the applicant would welcome to safeguard the potential impact on trees.
So in summary, you can do the construction of development without harming the trees. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Thank
yes.
You.
Prasad.
Yeah, Mr. Singh, I noted the officers talks about a unilateral undertaking. Please explain how that is intended to address the officer's concern.
Thank you, Councillor. One of the, well, the main reason for refusal, putting the trees to one side, is the visual impact. That's the main that's been put forward as residents walk up Rushwood Close. Now, firstly, it's got to be accepted that you would have to stand at an acute angle to actually have that view. As you're walking, you know, unless you're on that angle looking up, you're not necessarily going to notice the development because it's a pretty, you know, the ridge height and the eaves are pretty low. What we're proposing is as you walk up Rushwood Close, there's an existing brick wall that's about 2.3 metres high. In front of that brick wall, you've got trees and you've got existing vegetation. And what we're proposing via this unilateral undertaking, via the applicant, which he signed, is an undertaking to the council that if planning permission is granted, that wall cannot be removed. And the vegetation that's in front of that wall can also not be removed. And what we're suggesting is that the maximum height of detention is perhaps 4.5 metres. The existing vegetation is about 3 metres. So you're only going to be able to see 1.5 metres at an acute angle. And the unilateral undertaking is designed to safeguard the council's position and to help mitigate any alleged or potential impact on that view. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. the agent, can you tell me about the permitted development that was agreed and the difference between that and what you're proposing now?
Thank you. Okay, so the permitted development that we submitted was a prior approval application. Councillors will probably be aware that the government introduced something called the householder notification scheme, meaning that for detached properties you can extend back 8 metres, providing you're not in a restricted Article 4 restriction or a conservation area. You can apply, and providing the adjoining neighbours, so the neighbours that are attached to the boundary, to the back, to the sides, don't complain, you can actually extend back up to 8 metres. We submitted that application and an application was forthcoming and granted. And what we're saying is that the application before the committee this evening is substantially less than what's already been approved.
Ali?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Sain?
Thank you. You said in your opening statement that this application has taken several months and Mike's responded to that. Have you tried to find solutions and work with the planning officers on the issues?
Thank you. This application's been going on since June. I think it's fair to say that the officer, Rebecca Rowley, has tried to sort of work with us to explore some options. But fundamentally, I think it's fair to say that the council's position has been pretty rigid in the sense that the officers have got a view in terms of two-storey extension is going to do harm, and that view is not going to change. So it's been called into committee, I believe, to try and get a sort of more holistic view, an assessment on the potential impact, because the council's view appears to be quite rigid, non-negotiable, if you like.
Right, I'll move to questions of officers. Alison, before we, sorry, John, 1 sec. Can you just explain why the recommendation is refused, when in actual fact the prior notification approval for 8 metres, we know by law it has to be approved. Can you explain to members the difference between that and why we are where we are?
Mike's going to do it.
Oh, Michael,
Chair,
yeah,
if you
well,
like,
sorry, Mike.
No, that's
Drop it up.
So we'll start with the prior approval. So the process for that is there's certain criteria, of course, that we have to take into account. It's not the same as a planning application where you consider all the merits and all the planning policies. So what happened in that instance is we determined it based on what was submitted, but lacking in that submission was details of potential impacts to the protected trees. But because of the process and that not being a fundamental criteria, it's something that allowed the local authority to refuse that application on. What it enabled the local planning authority to do was to include conditions that said prior to commencing that proposal to submit details to demonstrate those protected trees would not be harmed. And it transpires that actually that can't be constructed because of the proximity to those trees, which essentially I would imagine is why we're now back at planning committee with a full planning application. So those are the differences between the two processes. And in this instance, that's kind of where we got to.
So it's fair to say, Michael, that the prior approval couldn't be implemented because the information, first of all, wasn't provided, but secondly, probably was not possible. That's correct. Of doing what we've got, what could have been a permitted development. Councillor Murray.
You have actually asked the question virtually word for word that I was going to ask the officers, but just to follow on from that, from what the officer has said, if this was what's referred to as a no-dig development, would that have any effect on the decision regarding the 8 metres to the lime trees?
We do, Chair, at your approval, we have the tree officer, Cameron Gibson, in the meeting, and he's certainly the one that would be able to give the advice on that, if that's
My
okay.
apologies, Cameron, didn't know you were here. Perhaps you can explain to the members exactly what that would mean.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The no-dig proposal would mean virtually digging by hand on the same line as the existing foundations or footprint. Now, in my view, and Mike might correct me if I'm wrong with this, it doesn't matter if you hand dig or dig with a machine. If you grant consent for a building in a certain position, you grant consent for a building in a certain position. Whether you excavate with a machine or excavate by hand, it makes no difference. You're still going to impact on the roots of that tree and still need to sever the roots of that tree to build your extension. If there's conditions to do a special foundation technique, they need to submit that at some point. But in my view, given the level differences, they need to try and retain internal floor levels, etc. A hand dig wouldn't be appropriate in this instance. It would still result in harm to the tree through root severance.
Thank you, Cameron. Sorry, I didn't realise you was on the call. Okay, any questions to officers other than that, Councillor Norris?
Just going back to that particular point, got the applicant and the agent saying that it can be done. I mean, for our tree officer saying it can't be done, or very unlikely it can be done. So my own view is that, is it possible to do a condition, if we were minded to go for approval, that would say that the agent would work with the officer to ensure that any technique being used would not damage the tree? Because here you've got...
I think that's difficult. The fact our professional officer just said, however you dig a hole, you've got to sever the roots of the tree. I have to say that lime trees in certain areas are disliked as much as I dislike sycamores, because they drop a sticky fluid. And quite genuinely, they are rare trees in Warsaw. Now another one in Egerton Road in Streetley, at the rear garden property. But I think what's been said, and Cameron, correct me if I'm wrong, that however you dig a hole, you're going to have to sever the roots of that tree, which would result in damage.
I mean, the principle of no-dig construction is that you minimise the amount of excavation into the ground. You don't get rid of it. You can construct above ground levels in certain circumstances, but the ground levels in this situation rise from the rear of the existing dwelling up towards the trees. So if you're going to put an extension on the back of that building, it's likely you're going to try and retain internal floor levels at the same level. So that automatically means you have to dig into the ground level, which is existing grass. Now, the principle of no-dig construction is that you do maybe piles and beam type construction. You put piles in the ground, you put a ground beam in, but that ground beam is normally set into the ground. And where you've got a ground level that rises away from the building, it has to be set in even further to allow you to construct a floor level at the same as the existing floor level in the building. So there's still an amount of ground excavation going to be undertaken, which will still sever the same amount of roots as you would do with a normal conventional strip foundation. That's my view.
Should have took up construction instead of trees, Campbell. Cameron, sorry. Okay, any other questions to officers? No. Right, into debate then. You had quite a few extensive questions which surrounds a lime tree. The rest of the advice we're getting from our tree officer that it can't be done without damaging it, and that the prior approval couldn't be implemented because of that. So it's a matter for you to discuss now exactly where you want to go. I'm very quiet. Somebody, Councillor Hussain?
Officer has given his view on the report. The architect's opinions different. Officers have got to say so. It's a difficult one. My own opinion that it won't have an overbearing impact in the neighbouring street scene, because the issue about the design, about being overbearing. My own opinion, which is not an expert or professional, being involved in other applications, and I'm sure the architect said something that in their view, what they've got some tree officer, a private one, to look at it, and they're saying it can be done. So there's difference of opinions here from the council tree officer and the architect's tree office. I'm not an expert in the thing. I think looking at it, I'm going to move that we approve this application and put some protection on the trees on it. And we have also previously approved PD that application can't evoke. So on these 2 points, I want to move that we support this application, not taking the proposal from the officers.
That's seconded. Seconded it. So it's moved and seconded that the officer's recommendation not be supported. And I didn't quite get the reasons why, but I think you were saying something that the tree can be protected by a condition. Is that roughly what it is? Councillor Murray?
Yes, I mean, you know, if there was a way of protecting these trees, I would be minded to, you know, support the application. But what concerns me is that exactly how are you going to protect these trees when we've heard from Cameron that whatever you do, whether you hand dig or you dig it with your fingers, you're going to end up having to go down so far for the footings, and you're going to have to cut off the roots of these trees. So I'm just concerned that Councillor Hussein's proposal, how do we do what he's proposing when officers have said you can't do that?
Thank you, Chair. I think by putting a condition on it, the agents or the applicant's tree person will have to work with the tree officer of our council. If it's not going to work, then our tree officer can come back here and tell us it's not working and we can't have it.
The difficulty you have.
If they've got a, sorry, Chair, I was just going to say, if they've got a technique or they've got a company that says they can do it, we should allow them to at least try. By our tree officer, this is technique we would use and this is how we would do it.
The difficulty you have is when construction starts and the roots get hurt, the answer is it dies. And therefore, the protection of the tree is lost. There is also the fear, if I put it like that if the tree were to be damaged intentionally, then there is an element of the proceeds of crime, which has been used extensively across the country for people who want to get rid of protected trees. My worry is here that our professional officer is saying no, he doesn't believe it can be done, and the information we're given by Mr. Singh, which is not supported by evidence tonight, that it can be done. So, you know, at the end of the day, you're quite right. It's two professionals having different opinions. But we have the professional opinion of one who is a paid employee of this council, and he's there as a consultant to this committee. So I put that to you. Sorry, Alison.
wanted to make a point about the Councillor Nawaz said about putting a condition on and agree the details of that with the tree officer. Just wanted to point out it would be perverse to grant a planning permission that we don't feel that you could implement because there isn't a good solution to how you're going to deal with the trees. And the national policy says that we can't grant a permission, it can't be implemented.
Can I come? Yeah. I understand that, Alison. But what I have here, I think, somebody saying that they can show that they can do this construction without harming the tree, and we've got our officer saying that you can't. All I'm saying is that the condition would be that they would talk and at least come to a agreement whether they can or not. I mean, the other option, of course, is that we defer it and allow them to talk. That they can come back and tell us whether this is possible or not.
That may have been an option before you moved and seconded an approval. So I'm afraid that's not now. So I'm going to take the vote on whether or not we approve this. All those in favour? Against? I don't know what the vote was. Paul, you tell me. That's refused. 7-7, I refuse it. We then move on to that decision, please, Alison, Sergeant.
Mr. Chairman, I think we've taken the vote on the motion to go against the officer recommendation. And so do we need to take a vote on the officer recommendation now?
Indeed. The recommendation to approve was lost on the chairman's casting vote. So therefore, we now move the officer's recommendation to refuse. All those in favour of that, please? Against? Numbers, please, Paul. Sorry? 7-4. That's refused. Moving on then. The last item we have with speakers is item 9, 27 Austell Road. Oh, sorry. You're right. Item 7 is 38 Norman Road. We have one other after that. My apologies. Here, thank you. Oh, right.
Doesn't really want to.
Well, fine, you can go home then.
He's never spoken.
That's fine. I spoke to the gentleman upstairs. Fine. Well, he'll unblock. Just for the record, the gentleman to my left is representing himself on Norman Road. He didn't realise it was recommended approval. I did advise him that we would normally take that on block, and so therefore he can go home having spent and wasted his night here. We move that now. Move that. Approve it. Thank you. That's approved. Go on now. Go on for you. I've got to stay. Right. I'm sorry it's a marathon, but you started it. Sorry? The one we've got now is 27 St Austell Road, as I said. Yes, we did. That's the the gentleman's just gone, you mean? Yes. If you want to read that decision, Alison. Sorry? Alison Sargent, the committee have agreed to let the man go home early and approve his application because it's recommended approval anyway. Can you just read that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, on item 7, 38 Norman Road, the committee did resolve to delegate to the head of planning and building control to grant permission, subject to no new material considerations being received within the current consultation period, the amendment and finalising of conditions, and no further comments from a statutory consultee raising material planning considerations not previously addressed. And that's in accordance with the officer's report and the supplementary paper. Thank you.
Likewise, could I say, this very patient lady here, her recommendation from the officers is to approve it. It's entirely up to the committee, but as she's been here for 4 hours, you might want to agree. It's moved, seconded. All those in favour, please. Could you read that, Alison? Listen, I wish I was at home 4 hours ago. Look, as long as you get the end result, it's worth waiting. And plus, where would you seen all these cooperative people? Alison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is item 9, 27
yes.
St Austell. Sorry?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, 27 St Austell Road. And the committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control to grant planning permission, subject to the amendment and finalising of conditions. And that again is in accordance with the officer's report and the supplementary paper. Thank you.
Free to go. Normally it's take him down. Sorry. Thank you. Right. Following items we can take on block, which are item 1, which is Euro Foods. I second that. All those in favour? It's clearly carried. Alison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking for the supplementary. You've gone rather quickly there. The committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control to grant planning permission, subject to no new material considerations being received within the current consultation period, the amendment and finalising of conditions, no further comments from a statutory consultee raising material planning considerations not previously addressed, and overcoming the outstanding objections raised by the fire officer. That's in accordance with the officer's report and supplementary paper.
Thank you, Alison. I would formally move item 3, which is land between Wood Street and Lower Lichfield Street. Officer's recommendation as set out. Seconded by Councillor Nawaz. All those in favour, please. Anybody against? No. Alison Sargent, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 3 is Wood Street and Lower Lichfield Street, Willenhall. The committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control to grant planning permission, subject to conditions and the amendment and finalising of conditions. Thank you.
Final item before the private session, which is only to approve the minutes, is item 5. And can I formally move the officer's recommendation in the report? Seconded by Councillor Craddock. All those in favour, please. That is carried. Just read that, please, Alison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee has resolved to delegate to the head of planning and building control to grant planning permission, subject to the amendment and finalising of conditions as set out in the officer's report and also in the supplementary paper. Thank you.
Yeah, can we stop the room there?